Well, hello everyone, and welcome to episode 45 of the Yorkshire Gamers Read Big War Games podcast. And very shortly, we'll be going over to speak to Mark Hydes about everything wargaming. We're going proper old school. Mark lives down in South Yorkshire, and we've had a lot of growing up in the same area with the same people. So, bit of nostalgia in this episode. Is that a bad thing? I don't think it is. So we'll be talking about Vikings in Barnsley. We'll be talking about Threads, both the Mark Zuckerberg and the Sheffield nuclear explosion version of Threads, and Mark's painting and his history in the hobby. And it is a great old chat between two people of a similar age and a similar mindset. So look forward to that. Before we do, the usual bit of housekeeping. I have now got all my guests sorted out between now and Christmas, and I'm just in the process of working out who's going to go where and which episode is going to be released around about what date. So there's a bit of planning on going on with that at the moment. I have definitely secured a visit to Pro Art, so we're just working out a date for that. So that show is going to be coming up, something I promised I would do for quite a long time now. So looking forward to doing that. The next show is going to be the Summer Brews in a Bin Yard with my good mates Sean Clark and Alex Sutherland. So, as you know, a big part of that show is audience participation. So I'm looking for questions for our Ask Our Nora section at the end of the podcast. So if you've got anything you'd like to ask us three, be it war games related or whatever you want to ask us, we will attempt to answer it during the course of that podcast. So you'll notice some stuff on my social media over the next couple of days or so asking for questions, or you can send a question direct to me at yorkshiregamer@gmail.com, and I'm pretty sure it'll be included on the show. So give us your questions, and I can't promise that we'll give you a sensible answer, but you'll get an answer. So, on to today's episode with Mark Hydes. And unfortunately, again, I have had some technical issues with this program. And for some reason, the program that I use has deleted a big chunk of the final section. So, the chat about Mark's book is cut short, and the chat about his painting, professional painting with his company Conflict in Colour, has also sadly been deleted by the gremlins in the internet. So I hereby promise that Mark will come back on the show and talk about Conflict in Colour at a later stage, and I'll make sure that we have links to Conflict in Colour, etc., through the show notes in the various places that this is located. It was a massive shame because we had a load of problems, and we had to keep toing back and forwards and switching off and switching back on again. And I thought I'd captured all of it, but sadly, the first three sections are as normal, are absolutely fine, but a big chunk and a little chunk again at the end have disappeared. So my apologies for that. But I thought I don't want to delay this anymore. I certainly don't want to scrap it. So I'm putting it out there, and then we'll have Mark back on the next catch-up episode. So sit back. It's a long one again. It's great fun chatting with Mark. He's a really nice guy. Got some opinions, but we're in Yorkshire, lad. Get used to it. So, get yourself a cup of tea, sit back and relax. And without further ado, here's an interview. Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the interview section of episode 45 of the Yorkshire Gamer Podcast. And we are in Yorkshire God's own county once again. After we were in Sheffield with Pete Berry last episode, we've stayed just in the same area. We've not gone very far at all. In fact, we've probably just done a bus ride down to my next guest. And he spent a lifetime in gaming and has had many different parts of the hobby over the years that we're going to chat about today. From writing books and blogs about the hobby to running local game stores, he even has his own range of figures called Satanic Panic. The strictly on the weird side of weird shit. If that wasn't enough, he's a thriving professional painting service called Conflict in Colour. And he's also been on that there telly in a programme about models. So a link to autograph photographs will be available at the end of the show. Be warned, we're likely to go all misty-eyed about favourite wargame shows like Triples, and I know my guest was heavily involved in that over the years. So let's give a big Yorkshire welcome to my latest guest, Mark Hyde. Hello, Mark.
Hello, Ken, and hello to all of you. And, far be it for me to say it, but hey up, how's that doing?
Hey.
Sorry, I had to fit that in, Ken. Professional Yorkshireman.
We'll do subtitles for the Americans. It's same language, but different version of the
Where
language,
is this
isn't
America of where you speak? Is this near the other place?
it? It's past the other place and beyond.
Ooh, Liverpool. Well, that's me. That's me X-rated once again.
Oh well, that's what I'm hoping. That's what I'm hoping for, mate.
Yeah,
Have you done anything like this before?
absolutely not. No, I've appeared in front of cameras.
Yeah,
I've posed in front of press photographers and rubbish like that, but never done this. So bear with me.
and an in-depth interview.
Yeah, with an in-depth idiot.
But before we get going with that, we have our 4-minute
Yeah.
challenge. And that's just a chance for you to give us a bit of a summary of your background in gaming. And we're going to go into a lot more detail on various topics as we go along during the course of the chat. But it's just a chance for you to get the highlights in so that we don't miss anything during the course of the rest of the interview. So are you all ready, mate?
Start the clock.
We're off.
Right. I started when I was about 12-year old, so that'd be about 1981. I'd probably seen a few things before. Sean McLaughlin of the Bunker and some of his friends were on one of the Yorkshire channels showing an old, 1/72nd scale Street Riot game, which kind of caught me eye. And then about probably a year or so, a couple of years later, we had in Sheffield, we had several game shops. We had Beatties, multi-story toy shop called Redgates, Hopkins Models, New Model Soldier Shop. Then we got a Games Workshop. We got one of the early Games Workshops. Long story short, went in there, looked at things. Back then, it wasn't just fantasy. Shortly after that, met a guy called Steve Roberts, who was the chairman of Sheffield War Games Society. Who, let it be said, I owe that man a debt. It got me into a hobby that 45 years later I'm still here. Pete Berry came in to be manager of Games Workshop shortly after they opened, so I made Pete Berry's life an absolute misery, and I promise you, an absolute misery, along with a load of others, known as the Limpets. Played everything. I gamed 4 and 5 nights a week at organised clubs in Sheffield. I was all over the place. I was like a dose of hepatitis. Nobody could get rid of me. And I kept coming back. Gamed everything everything you can imagine. Historical, fantasy, role playing, you name it. If you could roll dice or shout yes, I played it.
You're in.
Taught myself to paint, but with the caveat that I had one of the first Games Workshop painters, a guy called Pete Armstrong, who's sadly no longer with us. I could talk for hours about Pete, a fantastic bloke. Died about 4 or 5 years ago now. And a guy called Andy Ritson, who's still alive, but now works in computer games. Two of the finest painters that very few people have heard of. Very well respected locally, very well respected nationally, but kind of not known at the same time. Picked up off them, entered my first few competitions, crossed swords with the late Ian Smith, who, when I won my first competition, basically said of me, well, that makes you Yorkshire's best horse painter. High praise indeed.
High praise
indeed. Went on, gamed. Met my wife, came out of a bad relationship, met my wife, got married, went to work for Chris Harvey Games. Again, no longer with us. He was one of the big, well, he's with us, but the company's not. One of the big importers of games into the UK from, the US and Europe. Ran Dungeons and Starships until the parent company went bust, and then totally underfunded with 500 quid in my pocket. I took it over and ran it for about another 4 years. That all went down. I kind of went down with it in every way possible, mentally, etc. It's one of the, it's the hobby. They always say, if you want to make $1 million in wargaming, invest 2 million. Well, they do that. Came out, went into civil service, carried on gaming, slowly built up, my interest again. I'd lost a lot of interest after Dungeons and Starships, and really beyond that, it was just a case of carrying on wargaming, and 10 years ago, getting to where I am now, starting up figure painting, walking out the civil service, and just going on from there. But it's just been games. There's too much to fit into 4 minutes.
Well done, mate. Well done. Woof. Whoa. 3 minutes 50. Excellent. Well done.
I had 10 seconds of me left. Let's get a quick sup of me tea.
Well, it's not easy. It's not easy to get 4 minutes in, because I think we're the same age. I'm in my mid-50s.
Yeah.
So
I think we're looking at about. I'm looking at about 11 and a quarter years per minute.
Yeah.
So you're working it out.
Not easy.
It's not, no.
At all.
I thought I could walk that, but I've proved myself wrong.
Well, there we go. Right. There's plenty of time to expand on that from there. Where do you get your gaming fix at the moment then? You've got a setup at home, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I parted ways with Sheffield Wargaming Society about 7 years ago now, 6-7 years ago, for one reason or another. And we got to COVID. I've always been one of these people, like everybody else. I always thought I'd got to game, everything that was going.
Yeah.
So I got piles of lead. Now, if you can imagine, I'm painting 50 hours a week professionally now, or since 2011. I get to a weekend, I don't want to paint, but I want to game.
Yeah.
So when we got hit by the Great Creeping Lurg in 2020, unlike most people, I wasn't kind of locked down and sent home from work. I was locked down and sent to work, Get thee to the studio and do some work, lad. And so I just, like everybody else, there were no shows. I massed up my gaming fund. I have 10 months a year where I stash money away for gaming, and then I have 2 months of downtime, November and December, and I pay for Christmas. It's just one of these things. It's how I do it. It means I don't go into red, and I keep all my family happy because they all get presents, as opposed to boxes of lead with, I thought you'd like these. Love, Dad. So yeah, and to be honest with you, we'd got a builder who'd come to do some work and change all the back garden, just like a lot of people did. Focus went to the garden. Long story short, he asked me what I was doing with this old knackered garage I'd got, and I said, "Well, I'm going to knock it down and build a games room, but I've just, it's 1,400 quid a square metre, for railway sleepers, and it's quite a big garage." So he basically turned around and said, let me have a look. So he went in and he went through. We had a glazed unit put in when we moved into this house, but it was literally a 1960s rebar concrete garage, 40mm thick concrete walls, no roof on it. We'd got a front door to make it look pretty, no roof. And we'd just been throwing clutter in like you do, we've moved to a smaller house, clutter. He went in, climbed across the clutter, dislodged Lord Lucan, who apparently had been there some years. And he's not now, he's in a landfill. And,
is he?
Yeah, nothing to do with me, I assure you. And basically came out and gave me a ridiculously low quote and said, I can turn this garage into a gaming room. He didn't even know what to call it. He says, somewhere that you play with your little toy men. Toy men? Little lead dollies, sir, surely. And sure enough, 5 weeks later, I'd got this quite comfortably sized gaming room, fully lit, heated, everything done based on this old 1960s 4 concrete walls. Yeah, so it's one of these things. I kind of looked around then at what I wanted to do and thought, right, I've got space now to play decent sized games, 12-foot games. You can do quite a lot with 12 foot. And it was one of these things. It was almost like a an epiphany. I thought, right, instead of building up, traditional 300 and 400 piece armies, not so much pointed armies, but club-sized armies. I thought, right, no, what do you really want to play, and what do you think you want to play? And I threw money at it left, right, and centre for the entirety of COVID. Found a really nice chap who paints, who finds it hilarious that I paint for a living but don't paint my own stuff.
I find that funny as well.
Yeah, well, it's the old church and state thing. Never the two shall meet.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know whether I'm state or church these days. But again, long story short, 2.5 years, 3 years down the line, I've got to where I've got 3 or 4 periods that I really want to play. A few have come and a few have gone. I'll be honest with you. The English Civil War's seen 3 iterations, and now it's finally gone because for reasons I won't go into. But we just said no. We're done with ECW. I've played it all my life. Lots of pike and shot. And I've kind of done the same thing again, gone back mid last year and gone, right, okay, you've proved you can do it. You've proved you can get the lead. You've proved you can get it painted, more importantly.
Yeah,
and you've got the space. What are the armies you always wanted as a kid? What were the armies that inspired you that you could either A, at 14-year-old, not afford, B, at 50-year-old, well, 55-year-old now, look at and think, I'm not painting that. I am not painting that. Is not happening. And sure enough, 900 Dixon's Early Samurai. Which,
no, there's an army.
It will be because it doesn't. You think 900 doesn't sound like a lot, but they're essentially 900 individual figures. And my chap that's doing the figure painting, the chap that's doing my figure painting, is apparently really looking forward to it because he doesn't do it for a living. He enjoys it. I look at a pile of 900 samurai and I weep blood. Absolutely weep tears of blood. And
I tried samurai once, and I think I managed 30 figures, and I got rid of them. It's one of the very few armies I've got rid of because they're not a pleasure to paint.
It's a bit like folk dancing. You try it once and then find out it's not for you. Sorry.
That's another story.
I cut that one short. There's another part to that, but I won't use that on the air. No, not in these days. Anyway, you can get cancelled for saying that. But anyway, so going back to it, I've kind of looked at things and thought, right, what would I really want to do? And then I've also gone back and thought, right, what are the things that I did when I was a kid that I wanted to do, larger? And here's where we're going to hit what you call weird shit. And it is.
Yeah.
The latest project is, I think this year alone, I think I've hit 3,000 figures either done or being done now. It's fantasy. There we go, fantasy. I've used the F word. I've F-bombed on Ken's podcast.
Yes.
I'm so sorry.
I've been reading through your blog, mate, and I've seen the growth of your fantasy army.
Yeah.
And I thought, is he going to mention it? Am I
going to mention it? Look, you build walls to break them down, right? You put up light towers, you knock them down. I'm knocking this one down. So all those people out there that are nothing but historical, I'm sorry. And all those people out there that like fantasy, you're all gamers. But seriously, it's something that I wanted to do. I wanted to break. I paint so much historical stuff, and I've done so much historical. I thought, right, you own a fantasy figure company. I own none of my own figures. I don't own a single figure. I still go and buy other people's figures. Talk about idiot. I pay three times what it costs me to produce them, and I buy somebody else's. But it's been an interesting project because I've stayed well away from all the big names, the Warhammers, the stuff like that. I've tried to write a set of rules that's designed, funnily enough, for big games. And, I think I've got it down to about 12 pages, including all the usual fantasy guff. You need blokes with balls and chains, Fingal's golden bucket, and all that rubbish. I've had to put the magic and stuff like that in, which I know it probably bores a lot of people. But rules writing is like anything else. You're trying to get, a result out of as few pages as possible, with as few explanations as possible, and as many figures as I can on the table. Fingers crossed, it'll work. And if the mechanisms work for that, then I can make them work for pike and shot, which brings me firmly back to historical. It'll work. Yeah. It should work for, the medieval Japanese. But if you like, I've started at the extreme end and then come back to historical. And actually, it's done me good.
Yeah.
because I'm actually starting to see now other things I could have done with my historical. That's been written down, noted, and that'll be adapted back in once I get this foul pestilence out of my system and become a fine, upstanding historical history book reading member of society
Oh,
again.
exactly, exactly. We all wander from the path. We all
Yeah,
wander from the
it's
path.
the unfortunate thing is all my life I've walked kind of both paths. But every so often the two paths diverge and I end up, looking like Nureyev doing the splits, because one leg wants to go down one path and one leg wants to go down the other.
Yeah, I think the
Yeah.
thing with fantasy for me is, and I have played a bit of fantasy, but Lord of the Rings fantasy, which I always kind of think sits somewhere between fantasy and history because it was such a massive part of my youth, those books. And I've still got a huge Riders of Rohan army underneath the table here that never sees the light of day. Um, so when you've gone into this period or this new fantasy army, what sort of universe have you set it in? Is it in a
Absolutely.
Tolkien like,
Yeah.
or how have you done it?
Yeah. Right. Okay. Absolutely. In reality, no universe. It's the Markyverse.
The
Um,
Barkyverse?
right. A bit like you, Ken. I cut my teeth on Lord of the Rings and stuff like that, and some really dodgy fantasy films in the 80s. Um, the one thing that's destroyed fantasy is regulating it too much. Now, when I grew up, I saw games at shows that they weren't kind of they weren't building they weren't armies built from books with one race of one and one race of another. They were absolutely massive evil versus good. So
Yeah,
anything evil went on one side and you justified why it was there. Everything good went on the other side and you justified why it was there. And anything that fell in between, you took off your shelves and used as you saw fit. And so the universe I've got is one where it's kind of evolving into there's definitely good and there's definitely evil. And it's allowing me to buy whatever I want to buy from the last 45, 50 years,
yeah.
and justify why it's there. Now, the fun's going to come when I start writing little biographies for every unit. I've bought 30 Vikings. So what will these 30 Vikings be? I've bought these, and it's going to be interesting because it's going to actually draw quite a lot on me interest in historical gaming. The only rule that I have laid down is that there's absolutely there's no gunpowder in there. Gunpowder is out. End of. I think that ruined fantasy and not taking it too seriously. I mean, it sounds like I'm being terribly serious about it, but actually, no. It's about going back and finding the things that drew me into the hobby.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way I'm going to go with my historical. I'm going to go back to basics and kind of underthink it. Everything now is over. It's all overthinking. Everything's got to be justified and shiny and
Mm.
state of the art. No, sometimes the old stuff works. Sometimes throw a dice, and if it's a six, you remove a figure. It can work if it's done properly.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, like you say, a lot of people can overcomplicate fantasy, and one of the joys of it was being able to do whatever you wanted with it. And I'm not going to mention any names here because it might upset somebody, but I remember a friend of mine got what he termed as an eagle for Lord of the Rings, and it was some taxidermied model that he got from an antique shop that was some sort of fucking sparrow or
That's
something.
that's freeform. Now, to me, if you'd have said an eagle, I'd have brought a Space 1999 transporter on and really
Yeah,
messed with people's heads. But then again, that's how twisted I am. But no, it's like you say, it's the freedom to do what you want, and
yeah.
you're not button counting, you're not stitch counting, you're not looking at whether that facing's right. Is that shade of red right for 1814 or is that 1813? And it's just nice. And again, for me, particularly, again, with what I do, because I'm looking at colour and uniform guides and all the time, just to be able to, at a weekend, pick something up that's not related to what I do for a living for a while and walk away from it and just totally indulge myself until I'm thoroughly sick of it.
So yeah, I've noticed you've been going Ralph and Essex and stuff like that. So you've really been. Have you managed to get all that stuff? sort of new or not painted, or have you bought stuff that's been painted and you're kind of renovating it, if
Right.
you like?
It's been a bit of both.
Mm.
Essex miniatures have been around since since
Oh yeah,
since
forever.
since Noah beached the Ark. Um, but the figures still hold up. They're one of those figures,
Yeah.
Essex miniatures, and I'll speak of the 25 mil because the 15 are a different creature.
Mm.
But the 25/28 mil for all the new kids,
Oh
um,
yeah.
the figures look slightly odd when you buy them. They look slightly oddly posed, and the faces look a little bit elongated, very stylized. But the minute you put paint on them to even a mildly competent standard, and you start to put them into units, you see how Essex miniatures work. And it was the same with obviously with Pete Gilder's connoisseur range. It was the same with
Yeah.
Hinchcliffe, the same with Pete Morby's Elite. It's there's a lot you can do with the figures, and the older figures to me have got a lot more character. It's not some holy crusade I'm on, to say older is better. I'm not one of these that's going out saying, "Look, I've got 40,000 old figures, and they've all got lead rot, but they're original." Um,
Mm.
it's more about the design, the look, and the vibes that I got. When I was a kid, vibes, is that still a word?
Yeah, it is.
That's all
It
right.
is here, mate.
That's all right then. But the if you like the thrill I got as a kid, finding this hobby and seeing these figures, and those figures back then were cutting edge.
Yeah.
Essex were really above everybody else. Ditto with Ralpartha. Ralpartha historicals, fantastic historical range. Sadly, they don't mix with anything else because they are true 25. But this, in terms of design, they stand up to anything you can see today, and they've not got that. To me, modern figures have got like an almost a sterility to them, particularly plastics. While I like plastics, everything's sometimes that little bit of mismolding you got on an old figure could be turned into a feature. It could be turned into
Yeah.
a boil, a sore.
Yeah.
Again, nasty touch of the Peter Gilders there. You could turn something negative into a positive, and I'm kind of refinding that joy because some of these models that I'm getting, I can pick them up cheap on a certain auction site, or friends have got them, or sometimes I'll go straight to the manufacturer like Essex and buy them. I'm buying left, right, and centre. Ditto with me historical. And what I'm getting from it is a lot of that initial sparkle that I got. 13 years old. When I first learned to really paint. I'm getting that sparkle again, so it's very, very refreshing. It's keeping me mentally young, if you know what I mean. It's
Yeah.
keeping me engaged with the hobby by going backwards and not.
Yeah. When I spoke to Pete Morby at Elite, he's still got that fire and that energy, and
Yeah,
he's quite a quiet bloke. Is Pete? I don't know if you know him.
I do. Yeah,
Yeah, he's quite a quiet bloke, and I was quite surprised when he agreed to do the interview. But that enthusiasm he has, and he was describing to me how he plans a unit. No, he doesn't plan the like a that figure. He plans
yeah.
how the unit's going to look, and then he builds the figures to make that unit. And it is. I still look at some of those old classics, some of the stuff that Doug Mason has done with conversions and stuff, and it's still amazing.
It
It's
is.
still fantastic compared to. Not a massive fan of computer design figures. They just lack a soul. Is
Don't
that? Can I say that?
don't don't go down that road. That road is the road to perdition. I could rant for hours. No, 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 not happening. Um, but yeah, I mean, an interesting aside is you're saying Pete
Yeah,
Morby's quiet. I've actually in the '90s, late '90s, early 2000s, I used to do airsoft where you dress up in
oh
camouflage,
yeah,
and
yeah.
Pete Morby went to a couple of events. Didn't know he
Did
was
he?
turning up, and I'm sat in a trench with Pete Morby, and we're taking incoming fire. I fought with Pete
Oh,
Morby.
you fought
Um,
with Pete Morby.
oh,
Wow.
yeah, he's quiet, but he can't half deliver. Um,
I can imagine him being a sniper,
he
just
was
there, just quiet, waiting for his moment.
he was one of the
Boom.
first people I'd seen at an airsoft event wearing a Kevlar lid. And I'm not going to mock the man because some of those pellets were going at
Yeah,
525 feet per second. They do tend to leave a small bruise, and
yeah.
you see them pinging off, and you're thinking, I'm sat next to somebody who was like, in my books, one of the top figure designers, and we're being shot at. Brilliant. You can't get closer to real warfare. Um,
Oh,
but no, but
fantastic.
again, with you said with Pete's stuff about him planning a unit. In my time, I painted quite a lot of elite stuff for clients and friends and myself. And the one thing that you learn very quick with the older figures, like elite, connoisseur, Hinchcliffe, is the same figure, just with a twist when you base it, when you stick it to
Yeah,
the base. Just a little twist on the glue, and that figure's a totally new figure. It's the same
yeah,
pose, but just changing that angle, and you got two guys looking at each other. Guy ducking forward. You put a little bend on it. You could get so much out of maybe 3 or 4 figures. And
yeah.
I think to be honest, I'd like to see wargaming go slightly backwards to back to that, where people have got to put, it's a little bit less done for you. It's a little bit less, you know, ready to go. I know, everyone wants everything as fast as they can now. Everybody wants instant armies. But I think putting that little bit of effort in, I think you get so much more out of it. And the
Mm.
army is yours. It's personal. It's personal to you.
I think there is a little bit of that with. I'm not a massive fan of plastic figures, I've got to say, but I think there is a little bit of that with the ability to pose them and to bring heads in from different packs and stuff like that. Especially the stuff that the Perrys do, because them lads know what they're doing. And I'm just building some French Franco-Prussian War at the moment, and I've just imported a few arms and heads and stuff from other, and I've got unique units now that I've built, and there's absolutely no way I can sculpt. I've tried and I'm shit. So I'm just,
Yeah,
I the plastics are that's the only thing I enjoy about them is that ability to multi-pose them.
I've got to say, Ken, and I'm going to sound like I'm brown nosing here, but your Italian reunification stuff
Mm,
has kind of got me looking at plastics at a time when I'd walked away from plastics. I'd
yeah.
gone completely away from them because, again, I don't want to spend. I've got probably 2 8-hour slots at a weekend for my hobby if I'm lucky, and I found out I was spending an entire weekend sticking figures together, and I just didn't want to do it. Too much like
No.
work. But that said, the stuff you've done, as you've put, you've seen some of my comments. I'm bit of a fanboy. They're absolutely gorgeous. But no, I mean,
Oh, thank you very much.
I still tend to buy lead. I mean, my argument with lead is A, I can line my coffin with it.
Yeah, yeah.
B, I can always
Good
cash
point.
it. I can always cash it in for scrap.
Yeah.
And C, if things do get naughty in Europe and we go to
Mm.
World War III, I've got a lead lined room.
Right, yeah, it's good thinking. Good thinking. I like that. I mean, your 1960s garage will take a 40 mil round from a reasonable distance, I would think, because
Now
they're pretty solid.
solid. Now my builder's been round it. You could probably stop at 105.
Oh, hey,
I see. You've got to remember, I live in the city where they set the film Threads.
yes.
And if anybody doesn't know, I'll quickly. It's about World
Mm.
War Three, and it starts in Sheffield. It's nothing to do with me, but I was in it.
Oh,
I
were
actually
you?
was in it.
Wow.
Yeah, little fun-filled fact. Yeah, I was person being puked on number 3, just left of the camera. Um,
Oh, nice,
yeah, I could tell you stories
nice.
about that. But again, that tied in with because we were all gamers. We were all young gamers.
Yeah.
And we were into anything that got us out of the boredom of the 1980s, very early 80s. We did it, So
So what
BBC.
was Thread? Was Thread sort of 83, 80?
I thought earlier.
Oh,
I think it was earlier than like
was it?
82, 83. I could look it up, but it's
Yeah.
early 80s because we'd still got a Beatty's models and we'd still got Pete Berry as manager at Games Workshop, so it must be fairly early because Pete, as you know from
Yeah.
Pete's interview, he moved on. But yeah, they filmed Threads, all done around Sheffield, and I know we're possibly going to talk about triples later, but I can tell you how threads and triples come together in a
Oh,
quite
way up.
quite a witty little aside. Which now you've seen me, you've got to imagine me a lot thinner.
Yeah.
In your mind's eye, 14-year-old and stupid.
Yeah.
But we'll come to that later.
No
I've
worries.
reeled you
Well,
in now, Ken.
yeah, I have, mate. You have. Well, that program, that absolutely scared the living daylights out of me. Because when you'll be the same. We were growing up in the early '80s, and the threat of being turned into glass at any second was pretty big. And seeing Threads, it kind of all brought it back because it was how a northern city would, how any
Absolutely, yeah,
city would react to it.
yeah.
And it did make me giggle that Mark Zuckerberg has decided to call his new version of Twitter
I
Threads.
gave me. I was sat there having my first coffee a few days ago when they announced that. And that came on Radio 4, and I almost spat my coffee back in and thought, if only you knew, if only you
Yeah.
knew. But I mean, the funny thing for me is that my wife, when they set Threads, my wife lived on the outskirts of Sheffield, where
Mm.
the command and control bunker was supposed to be for local government. And it's one of the big jokes between me and her, that had it gone off, we'd not have met. Not because of that, but you were literally, your back garden was over where the bunker is. When they showed you the
Yeah.
map of it and where it is. It probably is actually. It is probably actually there, but they were all real places, real parts of Sheffield.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
as you say about it being scary, I watched it about 2 years ago. I thought, let's go back and let's see if I can spot me and a few people I know.
Yeah.
Not that
Yeah.
I'm in any way narcissistic. Is it narcissistic? Yeah, yeah. I'm not a big head, but I watched it again, and it's still 30, 35 years down the line, scares the crap out of me. Can I
Yeah.
can I
I was,
say
and
can I
I was
say crap on the telly?
fucking course you can. The number of I've still got the brews in the Vineyard that I do with Sean and Alex. The Christmas one is still hidden by YouTube.
Yeah,
Nobody can find it because there's that much stuff on it. But anyway, I digress.
yeah.
Digress.
Right. So, moving along.
Moving along. So Fantasy Army, you're big into that at the moment.
Yeah.
Anything else that you've got working on at the moment, army
Yeah,
wise?
yeah. I was really lucky. A couple of 3 months ago, I managed to buy an X display game, Serenity Flats, complete Wild West setup. And
Oh,
again,
nice.
it's been one of these things. About 10 or 12 years ago, I was sat playing a game one Saturday morning with a friend of mine, and I said, I might do a Wild West setup one day. And I thought, like you do, livery stable,
Yeah,
marshal's office, general store, couple of shacks, half a dozen gunfighters. We're done. Forgot about it.
yeah,
Looking on the old, well, I said the old, looking on the Bazaar of Obscurities, forum, and they've got a sales section. There's a guy selling a complete Wild West setup. So me being me and still being flush from Christmas. I thought, right, okay, let's find out how much he wants. And four figures, very reasonable four
yeah.
figures. But all of a sudden, I've got this 12 foot by 4 foot Wild West town, complete with railway. Um,
Wow.
Now that's dangerous because one of the other things is model railways, and the two don't. They're not.
Yeah,
The two aren't supposed to meet. It's like matter and antimatter, or crossing the beams in Ghostbusters. Model railways, war games, they don't mix. Unfortunately, the chap I bought it off pointed out it was all American model railway stuff in O gauge, narrow gauge. Well, it's what they call ON30, which as a scale, if you think about it, it's got the size of 28 mm figures, but it's got a much narrower, you know, track gauge. But in 28 mm, you've got these absolutely perfect, rail cars and trains, a bit on the large side. But he broke it to me. It's still got all the motors in. So now I'm thinking. So now you've spoken to me a couple of times, Ken. You know me. I have these
yeah,
wild ideas, and
yeah,
I run with them. I either
yeah.
run with them, or my
Why
wife,
not?
or my wife puts the
Well,
puts the
stop.
ball and chain on and says back. And I would say for the right reasons. I do need to be controlled. She's definitely a controlling factor. I kind of thought, right, I might redo this. So it's all sat in storage boxes. We've had it out a few times, played a few
Mm,
games, really enjoyed it. It's a keeper, and that's I either have keepers, maybes, and you're going conveyor belt,
yeah,
and one or two things get kept, and it's a keeper. So now my thing is to kind of try and take it to a show, and we were sat talking. I sat talking to a chap called Mick Rothenberg from Sheffield. He'd come to see me a few weeks back, and we were talking about it. And he said, "Oh, it's really nice." And I said, "Yeah, I can motorise it. As long as this motor works, I can come up with some track. We can have a train going backwards and forwards." I
oh
said,
wow.
so then me being me, I said, actually, we can have it disappear. We can have it disappear behind a backdrop, and then
Yeah.
reappear a bit later. And he says, you could put some Indians chasing it. I said, I think I can do better than that. So now I'm trying to work out. You can actually get a system for model railways that lets you take a matchbox type car and using motorized magnets under a realistic looking road. it drags the car along.
Oh, nice.
So now you've got me thinking, right, 28 mil, Plains Indians, could we get them? Could we cut a gouge into you? Could we cut a gouge that you can't really see into a grass mat? Could we run this system through it and physically have these Indians while a game's going on at a show?
Oh, that would
Can
be
we have
awesome.
these Indians at different speeds? Just maybe half a dozen of them, but can we get them all on this track and have them keeping pace with this train? And at this
that would
point,
be awesome.
at this point, 95% of the people have pressed off and they've walked away. But this is the kind of madness. This is the kind of madness that it's madness that keeps me sane. But then you start thinking, well, actually, it's no madder than the great late Terry Wise bringing a tribal warfare game to a show that's essentially Subbuteo with figures. And Terry Wise made this fantastic game, plastic figures, I think they were, using coloured beer bottle tops, weighted, and you actually played Subbuteo, table football, flick football. There must, if you don't know what Subbuteo is, go and look it up. I can't spell it, but go and find it. But basically,
I think my audience are the right age group.
Yeah, but you can but it's little things like this that they're a bit wild, but they can hook people in, and if you can do something a little bit different, everybody now is using LEDs, everybody's using, K-pop stuffing for smoke. Let's see what else we can do. Let's have some fun. It might not go quite as far as that. It may be that I find out actually what I've got to do is somehow use clear plastic to attach these Indians to the train itself. But it still look good when it disappears around a corner with half a dozen Indians,
brilliant.
Chasing it.
Brilliant.
But it's,
I'm looking forward to that. Put me down in the first game.
If I can make it work at the Dark Tower, if I can make it work here first, because I'm about as electronically knowledgeable as Bilbo Baggins, electricity in my world. We don't mix. It took me 15 minutes to get to sign on here. I had to go and grab the right technology, but I think I know people that could make it work, and it's no doubt somebody will run out now and do it, and if they want to, great, go and do it. It's one of these hobbies where the more we share, the more we get out of it. So that's one thing I'm doing. The other thing, obviously, is the big samurai setup. That's now been put back to 2025 because my figure painter's not so much burnt out, but he's just painted a load of Japanese fantasy first. Again, all Dixons. 500 of them. 500 of those, if you prefer. So he's now asking, can I do something different? Yeah, off you go. You've got about 6,000 figures to work through. But everything I'm doing now, I'm doing a lot less of it, but a lot less in terms of variety, but more of it. So I think the last thing I'll probably do, looking a couple of years down the line, will probably be Tudor. Probably maybe not Flodden, but the Flodden period. Henry VIII. Up against the Scots, big pipe blogs. Somebody has done the Italian Wars to death. There's this bloke doing rounds in Yorkshire with these ridiculous Italian Wars armies that are with these pipe blocks that are as large as most people's armies. So I've got to match it, but I'm not. I'm going to do it different. I think we'll do Flodden. Joking aside, Ken. Like you, I like big pipe blocks, and it's one of these things where the armies are actually very different. Your tactics are different. On Henry's side, you've got Landsknecht style stuff, and if you don't limit it to being a particular battle, you've got the whole gamut of Henry's army, which very few people do. I've very rarely seen it. In fact, I've painted it once for myself, and then I bought one about 30 years ago now. They're the only real, decent, Henry VIII era armies. Again, with Elizabeth's army, you don't get Elizabeth's armies being done. But let's be honest, they're pretty rubbish. They're not pretty to look at. They're an absolute swine to put a unit together as they were supposed to be. Particularly if you're working off George Gusher's Renaissance Armies book, which is
George.
As out of date as it might be, is still a go-to book. It's like chicken soup for a wargaming soul. It's fantastic.
Well, I had the green copy, for years and years and years. And then my friend Harry Matthews, who's retired up the Dale, gone to settle. He lives in Settle now, bless him. If you listen, Harry, I hope you're all right, mate. He gave me his orange copy signed by George himself.
Yeah, I've got an orange
Oh,
copy, and I have to say
oh,
it's in good condition,
yeah.
which sounds great, sounds normal until the fact that I do most of my reading in the bath. Now
Lucky it survived, then.
this has been expensive. This
Yeah,
has been expensive. About two Christmases ago, I closed down for three weeks for Christmas because that's how I roll. Boxing Day, the wife's asleep, the dogs are asleep. There's no grandkids phoning up to say thank you for the Christmas presents, Grandad. So I bought the big Hellion and Company book on the Great Northern War. Went to have a bath. Got sat in the bath, put in the old Radox bath salts, cup of coffee, few cold offcuts and some slices of bread. The wife's not there.
nice,
Cold
nice.
Yorkshire Christmas. Slice of pork pie.
Yeah.
7 o'clock in the morning, laid there in the bath and dropped it.
Oh,
Dropped it. 35, 40 quid's worth of book, straight in the bath. Took it out, couldn't do a thing with it, couldn't save it.
oh
Papa,
no.
I will tell anybody who's thinking about reading Hellion and Company books in the bath, please don't. The books are great. The paper is not waterproof. It's I've done it with Osprey. I've done it with old Osprey books.
Yeah,
You can take them out, shake them off. You can carry on reading them. Modern Osprey books, papier mâché, forget it. Hellion, not quite as bad as Osprey, but please, I beg you, don't be like Mark. Don't drop them
yeah.
in the bath. So I
We need
I had to buy it
we
twice.
need a review. We need a review of Mark's hierarchy of books for reading in the bath
Bath time
and how
reading, yeah, yeah.
how they survive
There's also
immersion.
the Wargamer's Guide to Restaurants, which is another one of mine. That's my other great hobby, funnily enough.
Oh, brilliant!
Eating. But yeah, dropping books in a bath, not to be recommended. But I've not quite scratched my itch for the Great Northern War. That might be something I do kind of post retirement. I mean, hopefully I've still got about 10 years in me before I retire. But I'm really seriously now thinking I don't subscribe to this. You can't die while ever you've got unpainted lead. I'm a realist. I've been scared of dying now since I was 14. 41 years of waking up every morning checking my pulse.
Um,
I could give Woody Allen a run for his money. But it's again, as is, coming back on topic. I'm doing less, but I'm doing it larger. So it is all about big
yeah,
games, stuff that, as I said, stuff that I really wouldn't normally have done. I wouldn't, or traditionally I couldn't have done. When I was younger,
mm,
couldn't afford it. And I'm kind of looking now. I'm kind of investing for my retirement and something that I can pass on to anybody in my family that might want it,
yeah,
or at least have that shed turned into a tomb.
yeah.
And I've my own equivalent, 40,000 lead warriors all laid about the corpse,
Yeah.
laid there.
Sheffield's Tutankhamun.
Funny you should say that. A friend, there is another Sheffield wargamer who's a professional archaeologist and historian who actually the tale he was telling me a few weeks ago is when he was trying to sort out his funeral arrangements in advance. Actually, went to his solicitor and said with a straight face, "Well, what I want a pyramid," and delivered this with all his,
Yeah.
all his specifications. I want, Ra and Set here, and I want this, that, and the other, and I want this on it. And apparently, at first, his solicitor took him seriously. Somebody that might be close to you at present and speaking to you
Mm.
is actually encouraging him to do it because he can afford it.
Well, if he can
If the
afford it, may as well.
Victorians can do it, why can't we? I think it would
Exactly.
be quite fitting that, particularly if you had a miniature army of who shall we have? Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
Inchcliffe Egyptians.
Yeah.
Yeah, be
We
really nice.
we could show the Chinese with that
Yeah,
massive warrior armor that they buried the king with. I
yeah.
can't remember what
Well,
it's called now.
That's it.
Yeah.
Some really nice QT multi-part. You know,
Oh my
cutie
word! Now we're
multi-part
going back.
Egyptians.
Now we're
Oh,
going back.
all laid around your feet. You know, oh, lovely. Sorry. Oh,
Yeah, probably the pyramids were easier to build.
uh, yeah, those hoplites. I could talk at length about QT. Oh, the tales I could tell. But yeah, I've had a few thousand of those in my time. But I've also had several thousand holes in me fingers drilling the hands out because they always had the hands sealed up like
Mm,
bicorn do now. And these are the days before Dremels. Yeah, you were sat there with a
yeah,
you know craft
little
knife
pin
carving them
vice
out, pin
drill. Yeah,
vice. Yeah, carving them out. Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Dave
yeah,
Hoyles, if you're listening.
yeah. I think they were the models that I learnt to solder with
Yeah.
because it's just like fucking not. This is just not sticking.
Yeah,
So let's boil it alive.
I learned to use super glue in a safe and responsible manner, i.e., one drop at a time. Because if you used too much, it went straight through the holes,
Yeah.
and then you stuck your finger to it, you waved it about. And in the 1980s, of course, a lot of stretched jeans with lots of
Oh
elastic in
yeah.
them, and when super glue hit jeans, your legs smoked. You sometimes you came just short of bursting into flames. You literally smoked. You smoked and melted a good pair of jeans. Then you're explaining to your mother that no, you weren't a closet smoker. You'd just dropped super glue on yourself. And the only way you could prove it was to fetch some super glue in front of your mother. If you had a mother like mine who trusted nobody and kept a big stick handy, and actually drop it on your jeans. Then you'd cop another clip up back of your head
Wrecking your
for ruining
jeans.
another,
Yeah.
ruining them twice. But oh, happy days, happy
Yeah.
days.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant. Well, in this section, we're
Yes.
going to talk a little bit about your blog, Real Life's a
Mm.
Bugger, because I have to say I do enjoy reading your blog, and it's not what I would call a normal, if you don't mind me saying,
It has a
blog.
parental advisory on it. Tim Gow of blog and rules writing fame once very politely and kindly referred to it as stream of consciousness blogging, which
Yeah,
it very much it started like that, but yeah, it is. It's not safe for work is the best way to put it. And if you are
yeah,
in any way overly politically correct or sensitive, please don't look at it because if you complain, I'm going to ignore you.
yeah.
To me, it's the Bill Hicks of blogs. It tells truths, and sometimes they're painful, and sometimes they're painful to me as the person writing them. I don't set myself on a pedestal. I take shots left, right, and centre, but I try to entertain as well. And I try to cover things, and I sometimes say things that other people are saying to you, but they won't say in public, and I say them in public.
Which is
Uh,
what I quite enjoy
And
about it,
yeah,
to be
and
honest.
oddly, I think I'm far more positive than negative in responses from people. You know, it's one of these things. If you don't like something, we don't live in a world where you have to read or listen to anything. It can get a little bit blue in places. I speak
I think what you are,
I
yeah,
write as I find. I write as I find.
yeah.
And
I think it. Well, how I would describe it is refreshingly honest. Because sometimes you have to be. We don't have to be, but people are overly careful about what they're saying. Um, when what they are actually saying, they're not trying to have a go at a person as an individual. They're just
yeah,
saying, "I don't like that."
yeah,
You know, and the same happened with me when I started this podcast. I'm not saying your little skirmish games are shit or your little
yeah.
tables are shit. What I'm saying is, I love massive tables with loads of figures. That's what I'm going to talk about. Oh my god, some people got very upset.
Oh, I can imagine. I can imagine. It's the same thing with me. I mean, I keep getting accused of being because I paint a lot of 6mm stuff, and everybody's saying, "Do you only paint 6mm?" No, I paint what I'm sent. It's just that the more I paint, the more people want the same thing doing. So, but I'm doing what I want to do, and if I don't want to paint 10,000 Napoleonics, I don't do it. I carry the same thing across with my blog. If something pisses me off, I say it.
Yeah,
And if I know you've read it, there's sometimes when I've gone, and it's been three sides of A4,
yeah,
I'd have written it down, and I've gone for it, and I've gone for the throat. But I try to also explain why I'm going for the throat and why that gets to me, you know, and if every blog that you read and every podcast that you listen to is just taking the same stance and covering the same things, conventions are going that way now. You know, I've ranted about that. Everything's going the same, and all you're doing is you're getting finite material, if you like, with an infinite number of people trying to pull something new out of it. No, say what you want to say, and you know, if people don't agree, they can press off, they can press delete. They don't have to look. They can argue with you. They can set their own blog up. It's not difficult to do. I taught
Mm.
myself, as most people did, and it's not difficult to do. And they can have their piece, and they can, you get discussion. Discussion doesn't hurt. Comment doesn't hurt. In a hobby like this, there are so many different facets to the hobby that are positive and so many that could be negative and are negative. And out of that, each person will pull what they want. And I suppose with the blog, what I'm doing is now that I'm maybe 25 years away from the grave, when I'm gone, it won't matter what I said. But no, it's one of these things. I think it's good to it's just good to get things off your chest.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you find it cathartic getting that out?
Sometimes, and I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes it's quite creative because you've mentioned my book. I'm not gonna go into the book here. It's it was one of these things where I wrote a book for my own mental
Mm.
well-being. The blog was kind of the same thing. I was going through a bad time.
Yeah.
Um, not with anything. Actually, it was a bad time with my hobby. It was when I left. I'd left, if you like. I'd left the world of gaming that I knew. I'd stepped away from club gaming. I'd I'd just I'd run myself down, like a lot of us do.
Mm.
I'd
Yeah.
totally wiped myself out, to be honest. And the blog and the book I wrote the book. I went to 388 pages, and I'd still not scratched the surface of 45 years. And some of the characters, it's not just about me; it's about people, and some fine people and some complete bloody idiots. Uh, but all part of this hobby. So the blog kind of became a jump off platform for that. So where I've got something that I didn't want to put in the book, or I didn't want to go back and rewrite. I kind of used the blog, and the blog's sort of becoming a notebook for me, if you like, to work from in future. I have got plans for another book because there are big chunks that I didn't cover, and bringing it right up to date as well, and doing a bit more on the wargaming side, because a lot of it was the fantasy side, because that was where the books were back then. When I wrote that, it was
Yeah.
memoirs of if you like geek culture, which was largely Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that, and role playing in '80s. Less the wargaming, but actually I had more fun with the
Yeah.
war games hobby and the characters, because they are the real characters. As you walk
Yeah.
around a show, and sometimes you smile. I mean, I see people I've not seen for 40 years, and I think, my God, you're still alive.
Yeah.
Last time I saw you, you were killed up. You were killed up in the boot of somebody's car at a convention after going on a bender, mentioning no names, but they're from the Leeds area. And I think you were at Fiasco last year, and I said to you,
Yeah.
"Oh, that's so and so. I've not seen him for years. Oh, he's still alive." Um, and it's so. I mean, really, I use it as a mem. I also try to kind of use the blog. I use it abrasively, but I also try to get people to think about the hobby. Think, you know, particularly if they're getting older, thinking if I can put all my memories down, somebody else
Mm.
can, and we've got a brilliant collective knowledge base, a history. We've got an unwritten history that needs writing, and so I kind of do it in an irreverent way. But what I'm trying to do is make people kind of laugh at themselves, laugh at me, laugh at the hobby. Don't take things so seriously.
Mm. And you still regularly update it. I mean, blogs, uh, and I'm sure you'll agree, blogs are not the um, popular thing that they were 10 years
They're
ago. They've
not.
kind of
No, I
dropped
do.
down, and YouTube and other things have taken over
Yeah,
where that's gone. But you do regularly update, and once every week or 2 weeks
I
there's
do.
something new on there.
I do. I mean, to be honest with you, certain times of the year I blog more than I blog more than others, because certain times I'm even busier. Or if I get a nightmare scenario where, if you like, an entire month's work is Napoleonics in various scales, I put a lot more time in than I normally would. So I don't have as much time. But there again, sometimes if I've got insomnia, which I do suffer from, you've caused me 3 nights of it this week. I'm absolutely crapping myself about coming on here. Um,
You shouldn't, mate, because
well,
it's the.
you know, it's anybody who knows my blog and knows me knows it is really caveat emptor. It's definitely buyer beware. You know, and it woke me up a few times, so I went down and blogged. And I don't like wasting time, so or I might be sat painted and I'll think, do you know, somebody said this to me in 1986 and they were right. That's a really transient. That's a transient observation that only I heard.
Yeah,
And I'll suddenly write it down. You know, I mean, sometimes I'll pay. I do tend to write one or two. There's been one or two obituaries which have been a real.
yeah,
They've been a pleasure to write because I've been able to say really good things about people that I knew. But the pain they bring, and actually
mm,
putting it down, actually has helped me mourn.
yeah,
You know, it's been a great way. It's been a great way. You know, I might not see somebody for 40 years, but I might have had 10 really intense years with them as a kid, you know,
yeah,
and to suddenly find out, you know, they've gone like that, bang, and that person's not there. We're never going to meet up again. So,
yeah.
you know, the blog does have obituaries on. It has rants, it has reviews, it has my thoughts. It really is. It is a stream of consciousness. It's got a little bit of everything. But I would definitely say if you are easily offended, don't read it. If you want to be easily offended, please read
Yeah.
it. You know, make of it what you will, but don't judge the person because the person writing it isn't the voice that you're hearing in your head.
Yeah. Well, I always,
That's
I always sit,
enigmatic, isn't it?
yeah, I
Yeah,
always sit down and have a giggle,
yeah,
and then I think, where's he going with this?
yeah,
Where's he going with this?
yeah. And if please
I,
don't,
I, yeah, I don't think it's offensive at all, mate. I just think, as I said earlier on, that it's honesty, and it's something which, for me, that we're sadly lacking in many areas. And you know, when if I say something on this podcast and I'm honest about something, then I'll get emails. Oh, you
yeah,
can't say that, and it's like I can and I have.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. I mean, I was quite open on my blog about again when I kind of like broke with club gaming. That left me with a lot of mental health baggage. I said what I thought about it, and I got one or two emails from people who are going to remain nameless, but shouldn't. They should be ashamed of themselves, and if they're listening, you know who you are. Um, says he ominously. But I actually vented my spleen, and I said, look, no, this is how I feel. But at the same time, I then got twice as many messages coming through saying,
Mm,
thanks for being so honest. You know,
yeah,
you've said what I'm feeling. You know, you've
yeah,
said, you know, you've actually helped me. And like I've said to people, look, if you get chicken pox, you stay away from people for 14 days, but it's still chicken pox. If you have mental health issues, they're just that. They're mental health issues. You don't lock yourself away. Don't lock yourself away, please.
yeah.
Rant about it. Somebody will read it, and some arsehole might come back and say, you know, good riddance, top
Mm,
yourself. But another two people who actually give a damn, another two humans will come along, and they might just say something to you that lifts you, and
mm,
not only lift you, but also inspire you. You know, I got one or two messages that inspired me to come back to a hobby that I was going to walk away from after 35, 40 years. That's a good
yeah,
thing. And if I upset a few people in, you know, with my blog, but I entertain a few people and I make a few people think and I make a few people correct themselves if you like, then great, you know, great. But you're not forced to read it. You're not forced to look at it. And I'm quite honest. I said to people, look, you know, at the start, if you're offended, go elsewhere. I
yeah,
don't. I don't. It's not monetized. I've got almost 500,000 views now on a blog, so I'm doing something right.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, it's not bad.
Exactly.
It's not bad in about 5 years. That.
No, it's not bad at all. And I think having that ability to say what you think is good for mental health. It's something that's important for me. I don't know if you know, I did that podcast with Henry Hyde about mental health and
Yes.
wargaming.
Yeah. Very good.
And so yeah, I think it's extremely important that you have got somewhere to get it out, and other people reading it, if they see it as I do, an excellent way of getting rid of stuff and having a little giggle along with you as you do it, then I think it's an excellent thing, and I recommend everyone to pop along and have a read of that. Before we finish our first section, we've been going for an hour and we've not done the first section
Oh,
yet.
I'm sorry.
Podcast guests who talk, who'd have thought they'd be handy.
Yeah.
So the Venn diagram of wargaming. We have wargamer, painter, collector, and historian. So how do you see yourself fitting in with those categories? Which one's more prominent, or are they all the same? How do you feel about that?
I would say now, and I'll put I'll do a Pete Berry here and put a caveat on it. You've got to,
Oh, right.
if people can just remember that I paint for a living,
Yeah.
right? It's 50 hours a week I paint. I'm probably now 15% painter,
Mm.
5% historian,
Yeah.
and then the rest of me is wargamer. I'm about
Yeah.
playing. I've gone through 45 years of always painting, always modelling, always building armies. At 55 now, I want to sit down and play with my toys. There's a few more
Yeah.
things to be done, but it's about gaming now. For me, it's about legacy. It's all about legacy. It's about talking to people and gaming with people that I might not have seen for a long time. Maybe getting to meet one or two new people. But it's about play now. I want to play. For me, perfect retirement will be the room out back, across the yard, whichever of my Scottish Terriers are still alive at that time, because they're varying ages between 6 months and 13 years, and there's half a dozen of them now, six of them. But just sitting there with my Scottish Terriers, a cup of milky tea, a set of war games rules, and
Yeah.
either an opponent or a solo war gaming. What's that about?
Whoa, what's that
Um,
about?
but just immersing myself in soldiers, little lead dollies, not fine cast miniatures, little lead dollies. Let's be honest about it, people. That's what they are. The historian, the low score for the historian is history was my big thing right back when I was at school,
Mm.
and I crammed in more history books than I think most bookshops have got. I read and read and read, and I've got to the point now where I don't want to read another overview of Waterloo. I
Yeah.
don't want to read another overview of Pavia. I don't want to know what Billy the Kid had for breakfast. I just, I know enough. I know enough. I'm a war gamer. I'm a war gamer. I've read it. I've reenacted it. I've done all that rubbish. Uh, and now I just want to play with toy soldiers. I've got all the information I need now. The only time that I really bother reading anything is if it's something totally new to me,
Yeah.
or maybe I've seen something, I've looked at it before and not really gone into it in depth, or I've found a new twist on something or another use for some figures, then I might go and read something. But I don't, I used to keep a big library of books, a couple of thousand books, everything from, fantasy art books at one end of my hobby through to hard history books and then
Mm.
pop history in between. And I just got to the point where the only reason they were there were to impress people. I'd read them. I'd read them, you know. It's the same with uniform guides. I've painted that many figures now that unless somebody wants a specific unit, it's all up there, and most of the specific units are up there as well. It's not that I'm not interested in history. It's just become very, very samey.
I can see where you're coming with that.
Saturation.
Yeah, I've I've had this discussion with a couple of historians I've had on the program, and there's a drive with historians when they're writing books about whatever the subject is to have something new, to have a new opinion or a new way of looking at something. And at some stage, somebody's going to get it right.
Yeah,
And then why do you then need another thousand books on, like you say, on Waterloo? How many times can I read about the Battle of Waterloo?
yeah.
Um, there's probably 5 or 6 books behind me that I've not read for 25, 30 years about the battle. But then it'll be Waterloo, the new perspective, Waterloo, the thing that you haven't heard, what happened at
Yeah.
Waterloo that you didn't know. It's like clickbait with a on the internet. And is there something new that we don't know?
Well, the one book I'm waiting to see, and it's the one that I keep threatening to write. Uh, just in case anybody's wondering why I want to write this, I spent it's about 14 hours last year, sat in casualty when one of my dogs almost ended my painting career in a freak accident. And I was sat there, and on the walls of the hospital, it shows you all the different grades of nurse in like a little diagram, little like uniform guide. And I thought, Osprey, uniforms of the NHS.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Why not do it? You'd sell loads. Osprey, if anybody from Osprey is listening to this or has an inroad to Osprey, do something positive. Do something positive. Do a book on the uniforms of the National Health Service and forget about your profit. Give your profit to the NHS or some other,
Mm.
life-saving cause. Let's laugh at ourselves a little bit, but there are modelers out there. There are large-scale modelers out there
Yeah.
who will use that book.
Yeah.
You
Oh,
know,
definitely.
so
Definitely.
there's an idea, but you just give me a mention if you do produce it. Give me a mention. But yeah, uniforms of the NHS. But I don't know who I'd have to illustrate it. It's a difficult
It's
one. That
difficult. First heard of on the Yorkshire Gamer Podcast.
correct?
That's
Yes,
all.
yeah.
All we can say for here.
Copyright, trademark, and patents applied for.
Exactly. Well, we'll take a short break, ladies and gentlemen, because I'm sure you all need a cup of tea, and we'll be back very shortly. Right, after some technical issues, we are back for the part two of the show, the big game section. And everyone, Mark, gets the same question to start with, and that's what does a big game mean to you?
Right, it's not just the number of figures, and it's not scale.
Ah,
As Pete Berry outlined, you can do a big game in 6 mil. Right, for me, a big game can be a lot of people, or it can be a lot of figures, or it can be a large table, or it can be any combination of those. I mean, you can have some big games that are essentially skirmish games interlocked. One of the ones I'm working on at present is a big English Shuffle War skirmish game using, oddly enough, Pete Berry's Once Upon a Time in the West Country rules,
oh
which
yeah, yeah.
I've been reminded. I used to play.
I
I
was
used to
reminded
play a
of,
lot
yeah,
of that. And the idea is going to be that we'll use a 12-foot table with a connected set of hamlets and features, and if you like, scenario hooks with pairs of players playing across it. And once they've, if you like, if they win their game, if you like, what's left of their forces can go on and affect a section to either side or to one side, depending where they are. That in itself will be a big game. There won't be many figures, maybe 200 figures, but it'll be a big game in its scope. At the other end, I'm a big fan of the old Selyokin district war games. 25,000
the boys.
Napoleonics. I'm not a Napoleonics fan, but you see one of them and it brings a tear to where you think you can't get tears.
Yeah.
Even a flinty-hearted old devil like me can. Ooh, ooh, yeah,
Ooh,
ooh, yeah.
yeah. I'm sure it was one of their games back in the early '80s that I saw that really got me the big game bug because
36 man Irish regiments. Oh, yes, please,
oh,
sir. Suit you,
now we're
sir.
talking.
Ooh.
Lovely. Oh, I've got all
Yeah.
shivers down my
Moist,
back.
moist at the knees. Sorry.
Is it? No, it's fine. Um, and as we was talking earlier on in the first section, you're kind of going down that bigger game route with a smaller number of periods or a
Yeah,
bigger collection of a
yeah,
smaller number
yeah.
of periods.
It's what a friend of mine calls going in depth, not in width.
Yeah.
I used to look at him gone out and say, yeah, but I've got enough figures for this. And no, it's that getting to know a period a little bit better, and seeing how far you can push it. I've pretty much burnt out English Civil War at the top end. When pretty much every game you play is Marston Moor sized, it does get a bit samey. So now
Mm.
I'm going back and looking at it, and what happens in between the battles. The new collection I'm working on with it is all bloody miniatures. Their figures are
Oh, they're
fantastic,
gorgeous. They're gorgeous.
um, and that's going to be more. It's going to be more with the trained bands, local trained bands. Nipping across a border and nobbling a local village or putting a hole in the wall of the local manor. And unfortunately, I've been watching the old BBC series By the Sword Divided,
Oh, now we're going back.
and thinking, there's that scene where they get a barrel of gunpowder and they get a petard and they blow a hole in that wall, and that's a game, that is, and
Yeah.
there's the 20 men and a cannon versus 20 men and no cannon. That's a game. And it's kind of like you're playing the little things that happen in between the big battles. So it's all going to be done on 12 foot by 5 foot tables, at least. They're going to be long games.
It's got that Border Reivers flavour about it, that kind of stuff,
Now,
hasn't it?
that's the other way I'm going as well, is particularly with the bloody miniature stuff. They've got some really nice models, that will do as later border families. And with the recent Scots that have come out and the trained band figures that have just come out, you can do all these little raids. You can do cross-border raids. You don't even have to be involved in the actual war. These are just two families going at it across a river, either side
Yeah.
of a river, north and south. You can play things like that. There's so much more that I can do. And again, I'm looking at Pete's rules, the Once Upon a Time in the West Country, which, if you haven't read them, people, get a set. They're simple, they're playable, they'll have you in stitches. You'll have some of the best games you've ever played. And I'm looking at different things I can do. Pete used to run games that were set in the Spanish colonies. And his classic character, Sanchez Panza. Panzer as in the tank, but based on Don Quixote character. So little tongue-in-cheek things, but really in-depth, really good games. And I'm starting to look at that, and I'm sort of using big skirmish games as an antidote to always playing, big figure games, big number games, and bringing the two together. Actually, you get more fun out of big, quote unquote, big gaming. I'm still wanting to get back into playing games in the garden, but that's been banned in our household since about 1992, with
Right.
the lawnmower incident during the Gulf War, 91, 90, just after the Gulf War, where I had a bright idea one really hot summer's day to go and mow the lawn as flat as possible, because we could field pretty much the entire Iraqi army and three Allied divisions in 1/300th. Thousands, 250, 300 helicopters, before you even start. And I mowed it all, and the sun came up at 7 o'clock, and I'd mowed it at 6 and upset my neighbours.
Nice.
And the sun dried it, and we got a dust bowl by 11 o'clock, which looked very authentic. But
Yeah.
the at the time, the wife to be, now the Memsab, did put the kibosh on that and said, never will it happen again. But yeah. So it looked like a desert. Talk about big game. We're talking 70 foot by 15 foot.
That's what we like that. We like that.
But 1/300th, so you were constantly putting your hands on troops, to see 200 helicopters, in a war game, looks awesome. But we were using really slow. We were using the combined arms rules, which were the modern version of command decision, which we thought were the bee's knees, but they're not made for it. They're not made for battles like that, as we found out. But we got sunburn, had a decent lunch, and I'm still married to her. Still married to her.
Yeah, we used to play huge sort of, in those days, ultra modern games in the mid-80s with Bruce Lee Taylor's Challenger rules. And man, they are so complicated.
I'm just revisiting those, and it's painful.
Oh,
yeah, it's painful.
But he did that. He did that. Was it Corps Commander? Wasn't it that he did?
Yeah.
That was kind of up a level, and we still use those for World War II.
Yeah. The trouble we found with that was that once we found out we could up the size of battle, we just upped the number of figures and did more divisions and more corps. So it's a never-ending
story of my life,
cycle of destruction.
Yeah, that's all I've ever done.
Yeah.
Right. Anyway.
Right.
Pick a small battle. See, even when I pick a small battle, I go for a smaller figure scale.
Yeah. That's
so I'll go like, oh, there's only 5,000 aside. But if I did it in 1 to 5, then
get your magic 1,000 figures. My basic rule these days is an army starts at 500 pieces. It starts at 500. if I can do it if I can do it at 800 figures aside, I'm thinking you're being sensible. You are being sensible. It generally ends up being round about 1,000, and the weird shit is going to be 2,000, 2,000 aside bottom because I just can't stop myself. But you also reach a point where you have to think if I've got 5,000 figures on this or 4,000 figures on this table, and even with a number, multiple players, how many of those figures are actually going to get to the point where they're actually doing something? You end up, you see these the classic old Terry Wise and co games where they've got Napoleonic figures, literally packed in like sardines, doing the battle of whatever, and you're thinking there's about 12 units being engaged, maybe 20 aside. So you've got to kind of either have really, really fast play rules that let you get the figures in, or I think you've got to be realistic and say, look, what's usable. So for me, big games are great, but they've got to be usable now.
Hmm.
They've got to be achievable. I cannot. It's not that I can't justify or I can't afford, but I just can't see the point in having 1,000 more figures than I need,
Hmm.
to play the biggest game that I can.
Yeah,
You know,
I think we're a little bit more conscious now about getting everyone involved in a
yeah,
game, because I think when we were younger and teenagers, you would sometimes go to a big game and you'd sit in a corner and nothing would happen on your flank.
yeah,
Whereas now I think we're a little bit more conscious about that and try to design scenarios and design games so that everyone is involved,
yeah,
and the banter flies whatever you're doing.
yeah. I mean, we played a largish game at Christmas, and the scenario was attack and defend, and I was the defender. Pike and shot, 30 Years' War, based on a real battle. Can't tell you which one it was because I didn't bother asking. I just want to play with toy
Yeah.
soldiers. I don't care. I don't care. So long, just
Yeah.
give me toy soldiers and give me a set of rules, and I'm quite happy. And I was in a defended position behind a river, and the aim of the game was stop the opponents crossing the river. And I got accused of being disinterested. But when you're defending, what else can you do apart from roll your dice every turn and tell them to take a few more figures off? Oh,
Yeah.
take another 4 figures off. And like you say, I think particularly if you're playing big games, they've got to be more dynamic. They've got to be dynamic. I think straight attack and defend games don't work. I think if you can get it so that it's sort of cartwheels round on itself, an attack suddenly becomes a defence. You can switch it round, keep things moving, put a few decent random occurrences in. I'm not a great lover of referees for games because I always think that's somebody who's not getting to play with toy soldiers. Some people like it, fair enough.
Mm.
Again, falls into the same category as folk dancing to me. Tried it, don't like it. Um, but it's to me a big game's got to have a lot going for it, a lot of movement. It's got to feel big.
Mm.
It's not even about it looking big. Sometimes it's got to feel big. You've got to feel like you're in there. You've got to feel like you're involved. You really want to identify with the figures that you're playing with. And again, it's not down to scale. It's a state of mind, I think, as well.
Mm.
In some ways, as I say, a small game can feel big if the background that you've set it against is something much bigger. Particularly if you're playing a campaign. If you're doing like I'm doing now, where a lot of the game I'm doing is what would happen in between these battles. Looking at going back and looking at English Civil War battlefield maps and thinking, what would have happened? That farm there, or that group of buildings there, or that wood. If somebody had gone in there and then had to be flushed out, let's try it on a war games table. We don't know if it happened. Let's play it. But I'll play it, I'm using Grand Manor buildings, which are absolutely enormous. So you automatically need, even for a skirmish game, you need a much bigger table. But all my stuff's Grand Manor. It's one of these great COVID ideas.
Well, I have to say, mate, that your missus can't half paint a grand manor building.
Yeah, she's a keeper. She's almost like one of the family now. Yeah, and when she listens to this, I won't be.
So,
No, thank you.
oh,
I'll pass that
my
on.
my missus, because I did a bit of commission painting
Yes,
back in the
yeah.
day. She could paint sea on ship bases.
Yeah.
and that was it. That was as far as we got. She was quite good at it. I'll
Don't
give her
knock
that.
it.
But
Don't knock it
I'm not
because
knocking it. I am not
it's
knocking
better
it.
than the old Blue Rivers business. But
Oh
I've got a
yeah,
lot of
but
respect for somebody that can do a decent wave effect.
oh,
Yeah, yeah.
that's my signature dish. If
Nothing
I
wrong with
open a
that.
restaurant,
Yeah.
you can have a pipe block with a sea
Waves
effect.
Waves by Ken. You can have that one for
That sounds
free.
like hairdressers.
But
It
no,
sounds like
I mean,
hairdressers.
Kate, my missus had absolutely. When I met her, she had absolutely no interest. She'd never even heard of wargaming.
Mm.
And after his first date, I gave her a figure, all romantic, like all painted,
Oh, lovely.
and she ran away to Leeds just after that. And yeah,
Oh,
we got back
yeah.
together. And I mean, I've been with her now nearly 40 years, but because she's lived with somebody who lives and breathes gaming. I mean, an absolute nutter, in other words.
Mm.
It's kind of rubbed off, and she's tried stuff, and she said, can I have a go at one of these, or how do you do that? And it's been great. I'm probably one of the luckiest men in the world. I've got a wife who understands the hobby, understands the cost of the hobby, which has cost a few marriages, in my experience.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. Yeah.
I've seen figures fly from windows on the morning of triples.
Yeah.
As I was just talking to somebody about the other day. I'm a very lucky man. She's a talented artist. They did when Robbie Baker released the original Mexican American War figures.
Mm.
He asked Kate. He saw that Kate had done some flags, and he asked her to do some. I think they were Mexican flags at the time, but that's what they look like. Can you do a painting? And can you copy these? And she did them at pretty much twice scale. And he said to her, "Well, if you want to be clever," he said, being Robbie, big smile on his
Mm.
face, tongue in cheek. It's only painted. It's painted on silk. It might bleed through to the other side. My missus went away and did it. And if I don't know who's got that flag range now, but if you actually look at the Mexican flag, she painted all the bleed through on the
Oh,
silk,
fantastic.
which took it to another level. You buy so many flags now that are beautiful flags, but are essentially one-sided, and they were painted. They should have been painted originally. There would be a bleed through, and she did that. And people keep saying, "Does Kate still do flags?" No, why? Because she works for a living. You know, she works in quite a
Yeah.
senior and privileged post. Let's put it that way. I'm not giving anything away there, but she does it for a hobby now. It's her hobby, and she's been basing stuff for me. I can't stand basing.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, that's great.
but the thing is, I don't like gardening, and she does. You see, so we have a we have a fantastic arrangement, fantastic
Yeah.
contractual arrangement. Here's 600 figures that I want basing. The only things I base are the ones I paint for work. Me work. I base for work. That's my job. So I'll pass Kate a massive pile of bases. I'll stick them down and pass them her, and say, right, usual colour scheme. And then she gets garden centre vouchers in three-figure sums, multiples
Nice.
down the year. You see, so she's the time that she can't be in the garden, she's basing, but she's getting a lot of money, lot of cash for it. Um, but
Well, that's
I do it in garden vouchers because I always think money's a little bit gauche, paying your wife, but no, joking aside, she's happy to do the basing, so
mm,
I pay for a lot of the stuff for the garden for her. But I don't have to go in the garden.
perfect.
I mean, there's
Perfect.
70 good 70 feet of garden that's not been paved yet. God forbid anything happens to her, but if it does, it'll be paved. I assure you, it'll be paved.
That's the way forward.
Yeah,
Definitely the way forward. But yeah,
yeah.
so yeah, extremely talented, and
Thank
I'm
you. I'll
very
pass that on to
impressed
her.
with those grandman stuff. Absolutely fantastic. So have you got that feeling as I have that we seem to have moved away from a bigger game in the more mainstream wargaming stuff?
Now,
Certainly the magazines and stuff, we're getting a lot of skirmish games and
well,
stuff like that.
I know that you know my feelings on this, Ken, and I will try to be tempered in my response.
I might have poked the bear.
You might have poked the bear, yeah. I don't think we're going to go quite nuclear because I've had a couple of calming hibiscus teas. Yeah, we have. We've come to a point where people call 30 figures an army,
Yeah,
and I've had some nasty feedback when I've commented on this. I don't care. I don't
yeah,
care if I play skirmish games. They're not armies. They are two forces. They're forces. It might sound like I'm splitting hairs, but they're not armies. To me, an army is multiple regiments, not a regiment. I'm trying to be gentle. I, I really could rant here. Yeah, could really go on Nuremberg rally on this one.
Oh, well,
All right, let's have it. No, look, I don't like it. It's
yeah.
not an army. 35 figures is not an army. A Saga warband is not an army. Muskets and tomahawks is not an army. Right? They're not armies. They're forces. They're warbands. They're gangs. It's gang warfare. Everything's gang warfare now, and I blame that on Games Workshop and Necromunda.
Necromunda.
Let the record show. Yeah, gang warfare. It's got its place, but not in my gaming room, unfortunately. If that's your thing, fine. But just think about, go away, read about the period that you're supposedly playing. Try and read something about small actions of that period and look at the terminology that they used. My wife was just going to go down the ACW route, and she'd got 9 or 10 Perry's Battle in a Box sets lined up. A fair number. Not the largest number you've ever seen, but a fair number.
Yeah.
And she's just now started reading about small battles and companies being involved, and a company of this, and Company K, and Troop D. And she's just said, right, most of that can go. And I'm going to do it from this view because it'll become very samey. So, yeah, she's playing small games, she's playing warband, but she's learning the terminology. Don't call them an army. Don't call them an army. Call them what they are.
Yeah.
There's nothing to be ashamed of by saying, look, I've got a complete company in 1-to-1 of American Civil War zouaves. Good on you. You can put a lot into that, but they're a company. They're not an army. But no, for me, big battles. Big battles apart from the English Civil War and the other pirate project that I've not mentioned, but pirates are in there soon as well.
That sounded like my faction rant. Oh.
I'm waving it here, Ken. Ken just so you can see people, I'm holding my hands up in submission to Ken. I agree. Yeah, faction. Zip.
My granddad, bless him, he's no longer with us, but he was in the desert fighting mostly Italians because he'd gone by the time the Germans turned up. Wise move.
Yeah, good idea that one. Yeah,
good idea. But if I said, Grandad, which faction were you in? He'd have smacked me across the head with the biggest thing he could find.
Yeah.
This is not a fucking faction. I fought for the British in the fucking desert.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, my grandfather would have been the same. I fought for the British Army.
Yeah,
it would have been. I was in the British Army and I fought the German Army. He had a few things to say about factions within the German army, as I think everybody did. But that's the difference, people, between a faction and an army.
Oh dear.
The brown shirts are a faction.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let it go there, Mark. Before we
let me blood pressure drop a little bit now.
As you can see, I've gone a bit red faced there, Ken.
Yeah.
Fan myself.
Yes. So we've had a chat about big games, and what I wanted to do also in this section, because the place where I saw some of the best big games, and I put some of my own big games on, was Sheffield Triples, and Sheffield Triples, it had a sad end, but it will be forever my favourite war game show.
Absolutely.
And I thought it would be a great idea chatting with you because I know that I saw you many times there. We're finally talking to each other now, but I will, we'll have interacted unknowingly.
Once seen, never forgotten.
Exactly. So, what are your memories of Triples at the Sheffield show that was?
Let's say best memories. The thing that we all call the golden age, that kind of early 80s to late mid 80s. That was Triples at its absolute finest. That was British wargaming at its finest, in my opinion. It is only my opinion. The games that you got were fantastic. The scope of games and the size of games, the quality of games was consistent every year. It was good. They were big games. They were beautifully thought out games. Didn't matter what period it was. Didn't matter even if it was weird shit. It was weird shit done well. I mean, just absolute quality. The traders, resellers were not a thing. Actual traders came. I know times have changed, but shows. Oh, don't yeah. Well, we'll not go down that road yet. But you got people like again Essex Miniatures who came. They drove up to Sheffield, 2 day show. You could see Essex Miniatures on the stand. You could buy them on the stand. You got tabletop games with the late Bob Connor, an
Yes,
absolute
good old Bob,
staple.
yeah.
You got Irregular Miniatures. That stand cost me more pocket money as a kid. Why the bloody hell I wanted 50 25mm rabbits, I will never know. I didn't know then, I don't know now. But that's what I'm saying. You could buy board games, you could buy role-playing games. The whole thing was it was a proper weekend. After triples, people would be off to pubs all around Sheffield. You'd bump into groups of wargamers in curry houses. You could sometimes get an altercation with wargamers in a curry house. Yeah, that's another story. Triples for me was I loved Northern Militaire. I thought
That was a
Northern
great show.
Militaire was great. What I can say is, at 13-year-old, 14-year-old, I was going all over the country with people twice my age, perfectly safely, enjoying this hobby. Just enjoying the hobby. Most of the ones I went to were in the north, like Northern Mill, Fiasco. Oh God, there was the one at Harrogate.
Yes,
Recon,
Recon, yeah.
which I still love. Small show, but I love
Yeah.
it. Triples was the one. That was the one that every year. That was the one. Not just because I was from Sheffield. It's where I started, and it's where kind of like my heart was, was stuck, if
Yeah.
you like. And I mean, as a kid, I'd start saving in January every penny I could. I was painting at 14-year-old. In between, when I should have been doing my homework, I was painting figures. 50 quid a week in 1983 went a long way,
Oh, hey, that's
and
a lot of money, that.
I could do that painting in 83. And I paid for my hobby, but I went all over the country. But still the one that did it for me was Triples. It was a well-run show. Sometimes, every show has its ups and downs. Every organisation has its hiccups. But it was a friendly show, and it was run by gamers for gamers. A lot of the companies that came were gamers. They weren't companies first and gamers second. They were gamers. Just fantastic times. The people I met and the life lessons I learned at Sheffield Triples, that's a book in itself. Fantastic. But you saw people, as I say, I gamed in sort of 5 or 6 different groups in Sheffield through a week, as well as like my own little bands of friends that met, but actual organised clubs. And you saw all these people in one place at one time, for one weekend, and
Yeah.
you just lived and breathed from Friday night when they set up. When I was with Sheffield War Game Society, they'd set up on a Friday night. Even when you were set up, you'd be sat in the bar upstairs talking to the likes of John Armitage, an absolute gentleman wargamer. John Armitage, a Sheffield War Game Society. I could sit and listen to John for hours. I learned so much just listening to me elders and betters. And I don't think you see that so much these days. Everybody thinks, a quick click on the internet tells you everything. It doesn't,
There seems to be a let's go into the show and go
Yeah,
by like 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, and I remember um the you go upstairs at Sheffield, and then there was that back room where you had some traders. There was a
yep,
little bar on the left just before you got to. I can't remember. There was a guy who used to sell painted figures on the right hand side.
yep,
Just when you got through that door, I spent hours in there just
absolutely.
chatting
Yeah,
and drinking and enjoying the hobby with people that I knew. And I don't do that at shows. Well, to be fair, I've started to do that again at shows now. I've started to. I'm not drinking beer because I'm driving,
yeah,
but I'm starting to sit and drink tea and talk to people
yeah,
at a show rather than just buggering off at 1 o'clock.
yeah. I mean, I got
Um,
the. Sorry, I'm
yeah,
talking over you. I do apologise.
yeah, go on, mate. Go on.
No, I was just saying. I think the longest that I've stayed at a show was last Fiasco, where I ended up. I think you saw me sat in the foyer,
Yeah,
drinking, talking to a friend's wife and kids, and families were chatting. Buttonholing a couple of war gamers that I knew, and that's the longest I've stayed at a show. I was there at 10 and I left pretty much as the doors closed. I'll put my hand up these days, unless that show's got a bring and buy,
Yeah.
and with a very good reason, I won't stay at that show, because the stuff that's there is all resellers. 95% a lot of the time is resellers. If you're lucky, you might get one that's only got 50% resellers. The shows should be, in my opinion, reaching out to companies and saying, please come. Look, we know you're coming from Essex to the north. Please come.
Yeah.
You know, there are ways you can do it. Look at the way that BritCon works, the trade show at BritCon. You don't pay to go into the show at BritCon. So if you think about it, if you go to a show and you don't have to pay on the door, you've got more money in your pocket. Now, if that's only a £5, that's a £5 you can spend at that show.
Yeah.
Now, you times that by 500 people, that's a hefty amount of money to go across to traders, particularly when times are hard. I think clubs running shows are starting to get a little bit greedy. There are certain things that I've seen at shows, and I've thought, the way you're doing things is not working. You know, I've seen it from both sides of the counter. Don't charge £6 to walk into a show where people are going to charge money. Charge a reasonable fee. Most shows will make their money off the trade stands, and I would argue that with anybody. And if not, you're doing it wrong. Right? Find a balance. Make it affordable to people. Talk to the local press. I mean, triples always used to be covered in the press.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember, really back in the 80s, they actually used to have peace protesters.
Yes, I remember them.
Protesting triples. Well. Yeah,
wow.
they were like rabid dogs. My goodness. As I say, the only
didn't they kind of like slowly melt away? I seem to remember that there was a load one year, and then it sounds like 10 the next year, and then one bloke and his dog the year after.
Rumor has it, and this is only scurrilous rumor, people.
Yeah, we like that.
Scurrilous rumor is that they were quote unquote infiltrated in the night, and changed allegiances and went away. That might be a pure folk tale, but that's one that went round in the area at many clubs for many years, that they were in some way, which I won't repeat here, infiltrated and demobbed. But yeah, it used to be. It could. I mean, when the first time I came across it, I couldn't believe it. As you say, it was the time that, I mean, I started back when Triples was at the Victoria Hotel, the old railway hotel. Beautiful building. And if I looked behind me, I could tell you the first year I went. It's on my first painting trophy. And but that was a nice venue. But the peace protesters, we lost those once it went away from Victoria. To the best of my knowledge, like you say, it became kind of like, one man and his dog and a pair of wellies.
Yeah.
But no, they were a real. I mean, they were a real. They genuinely thought that we were going to bring on World War III by moving toy soldiers around.
Yeah.
Now, the only way you're going to bring on World War III in 1983 is under WRG rolling 3/6s if you've paid for a nuke.
Exactly.
And if you don't understand that, people, go and read a set of old WRG modern rules.
Yeah.
3/6s, you could set a nuke off.
I think we upped it to 320s on a D20 because we thought 3/6s was too easy.
That's a little modern. Steady on. It's almost Dungeons and Dragons, that, Ken.
It is, that, isn't it? Yeah.
It is, yeah. But yeah, I mean, Triples was a brilliant show at a brilliant time. As I say, the 80s, I loved Triples right up to the end, and I've probably got some good reasons which I won't go into not to. But that said, it was a good show. All politics aside, it was a good show. It showed the hobby in a positive way, and there'd be quizzes. There'd be quizzes at local hotels after the show. So if you were staying over at Triples, if you wanted to, you could go out on the piss. You could go back to your hotel room, or you could go and take part in festivities with other wargamers. And you're not seeing that now. I think it might come round again, but I don't think it'll come round with the same camaraderie. People knew each other. There wasn't so much of a barrier between, if you like, the names in the hobby, with air quotes, and Joe Average Gamer. They just happened to have written a set of rules.
Yeah.
Pete Berry was a prime example of that. Brilliant rules writer. He's done a lot for the hobby. Fantastic. But Pete, you could walk up to Pete I remember being studying Games Workshop on a morning, and Peter coming in and saying to the assistant manager, "I've just been working on a new set of English, well, it's a pike and shot rules." Now I don't know which set that went on to be. I'm suspecting it's Forlorn Hope, but to actually be there and hear that said, and you don't hear that now, and when you do hear it, it's all airified, but down then it was real grassroots gaming. It was brilliant. The games were good. People cared about what they put on. As we've said, Selly Oak and District, they're Napoleonic games. The Players Guild, who brought round all the Games Workshop based stuff. Massive display games, stuff that you only saw in magazines. It was either at Salute or it was at Triples. And it was Salute if you lived in the south. It was Triples if you were in the north. And then you got Northern Militaire, which was a brilliant show, but it wasn't Triples. For a start, it was in Mordor. It was over there, the other place. It was in the other place, so you had to get your shots for that one, being a Yorkshire.
Yeah, bit of incantation before you entered the area.
Yeah, few prayers and check your insurance. But no, I mean the Triple show, as I say, I absolutely loved it. The stuff that I saw there that inspired me. South London Warlords bringing a Starship game where all the starships were made out of things like ballcocks and funnels.
Yes.
And if you saw that, you'll know exactly what I mean. It sounds boring, but if you saw it, there were big models. They were 2 foot long, up on big flight stands, and they were walking between the ships to move them. That back then set standards. That's what it got me into big games. That got me thinking about big games. And I'll be forever in the debt of the people that showed me what it was about. The people from Sheffield Wargaming Society, John Armitage, Lloyd Powell, Ian Smith, Steve Roberts. I could list them. Roy Gunson, somebody who was forgotten in this hobby. They were really at the top of the game, as were some of the lads from Leeds. There were names. The clubs used to seem to intermingle a lot more as well.
Yeah, we used to regularly meet up with Sheffield a few times, and then Hull, I remember.
Yeah,
and they'd come over to us, we'd go over to those, and we'd just have friendly games and sit and chat during the day, and that just seems to have disappeared.
Yeah, I mean, you never got War Games hooliganism, did you? We never came up wearing us colours, looking for a rook. But no, as you say, but people, but you might only see people at a show. It's you go up and there's so and so, and you competitions were fun back then. Because they weren't so much pushed by companies. They were actual war games. I'm not a competition player. I've played it a few times when I was younger. But the characters that you saw, played in these competitions, the great Bruce Douglas. If anybody knows Bruce Douglas, you'll know what I mean. One of the most entertaining to watch somebody play a war game. There were people, there were real characters, and I think we've lost a lot of that now, says he through tears. But no, I mean, it is a shame that we've lost that in the hobby, not just at Triples.
Yeah.
It might go back. I mean, things go around and come around. I'd like to see it, in my lifetime, do it. But it's very, very hard when you're trying to, tell people that have only been gaming since the late 90s. What it was like back in the day. You can't convey in words. There was a smell to Triples. There was the smell of beer, the smell of the carpet shampoo they'd used when they went to the Octagon Centre, because I think the Octagon Centre had closed down for student use that weekend, which was why it was that weekend, I believe. But you could always smell the carpet shampoo and pipe tobacco. Now that is the mark. Now I'm not a smoker, but to me that is the mark of a good war games convention.
Yeah.
Brook me no butts on that one.
A bit of Saint Bruno drafting across the.
That's the one. Yep. Oh yes.
Yeah.
Well, Golden Virginia.
There used to be a couple of ladies who used to do the food and stuff, and we used to have a chat and a laugh with them every year.
Yeah.
It was just a fantastic time. I've just got to tell a story that I nearly died.
Please.
I nearly died on the way to Triples one year, and I'll always remember that I wasn't driving, I was a passenger, and we came round this corner, and there was a blue Ford Transit on the wrong side of the road coming straight towards us, and
Eek.
I just remember closing my eyes and thinking, I'm going to die in a larder in a larder. No, it wasn't a larder. A Yugo 55.
And I've not
Do you
even bought me
remember?
figures.
And I've not got my figures, and all they're going to say is Ken Riley died in a Yugo 55,
That would have been
and
embarrassing, wouldn't it? Yeah.
I opened my eyes and the transit had gone, and we got to the show. But yeah, that was a dangerous. And you were saying about irregular, and irregular are, I think, the equivalent to a heavy night out drinking, because you come away from it and you're not quite sure what you've done,
Right.
and
Okay.
you wake up and you think, like you say, where have I got 18, 25 mil ducks?
Yeah, it gets
All right,
worse. It gets
go
worse.
on.
Right. What I would like to say is, just before I tell this one, irregular miniatures. We were at York this year at Vat Attack, and Ron, the founder of
Yeah.
Irregular, was there, and it was an absolute pleasure. I didn't get a chance to go up and say hello to him. It was a pleasure just to see Ron behind the stand. He was holding court, and people were going up, and they were paying their respects to that man.
Oh,
And
what a guy! What a guy!
let this record show that is a man who deserves a lot of respect in this hobby. But yeah, it was triples, I believe, that Irregular launched their 6 mil figures.
Right.
And they were a game changer because they had the bases built in, as everybody will
Yeah.
probably know. That was a hallmark. That's been copied so many times since. And they turned up and they brought army pack after army pack after army pack. And me being me, and being a little bit petulant, all my mates wanted to get into this newfangled 6 mil. And maybe about 14-year-old,
Yeah.
young and impressionable. And I wanted to go and get me some weird shit action from
Yeah.
tabletop games, heroes, miniatures, and tabletop games. So I
Yeah.
wandered off
Yeah.
there, came back, and thought, I will. I'll go and I'll go and buy a nice ancient army, ancient since 6 mil. I can see this working. Went across to ask Ian, sold out. Right, okay, they've sold out. That's unfortunate. So I went back to the control area where we all used to dump our stuff. Excuse me, Sheffield Wargame Society's dumping ground. One microphone, 30 beers, 40 coats and wallets, and about 500 kilos of metal over a
Yeah.
weekend. And I went back. My mates are all sat there, and they've got bag after bag after bag of these armies. They'd gone up. You name it, they'd done it. So I went up and said, "Well, I was going to join you." And again, being young lads, they thumbing their nose at me. You can sod off. You weren't interested. More fool me. So they kindly said, "Well, we've got one here that we don't want to use." Now,
Mm.
you've got to bear in mind, this is a weekend where a company has launched something new. First time ever. First time it's been out. You can get 6 mil elephants, you can get 6 mil camels, you can get 6 mil chariots, you name it, you can get it. 6 mil. I end up with an ancient Frankish army,
Right.
which is 50 bases of identical, boring models.
Yeah.
And I was that desperate to stay in on the ground floor with my mates.
Yeah.
A week later, they're parading these armies, 50 chariots, ancient British chariots, all these naked fanatics. Me, bag of francs. A bag of francs. That turned me off to 6 mil for quite a while.
Yeah.
But you got things like this. You got new products being launched at triples. But yeah, irregular miniatures. They've got a lot to answer for. But in fact, I'm sat here now looking at 6 of their figures that I've got to paint for myself, and I am going to paint them. And it's the 2 Celtic druids sacrificing a sheep with 2 fires and 2 wailing women,
Yeah.
which they've remodeled for shame. And I'm actually going to enjoy doing those. When I have my month holiday, I'll be painting those. But I like irregular figures. I love the variety. They brought a variety that you can't see. They still do. I mean, obviously they still do. They're still going. But back then it was a big trade stand. And because you could physically go up and pick figures, brilliant. There was no barrier between you and the lead.
Yeah. I mean, if there's anything that you can't find, go to irregular.
Yep. If you want to experience old school wargaming, go up
Yeah.
and have an hour just touching as many irregular figures as you can. And that headache you get from the lead
Yeah.
is just like the 80s. That's the 80s wargaming. You touch that much real lead, you got headache, and it's. But no, that tactile thing sold so many things. I'm sure that sold so many figures. The ability to pick the figure up, look at that duck and look at that rabbit, and do I really want another battering ram? I've
Yeah,
got 6. Do I want another from the English Civil War Army? You're
yeah.
14. You can do what you like.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think there's a lot of modern companies now that could learn from that, and there's a few shows
Mm,
that could learn by going back and looking at shows like Triples and Northern Militaire, and looking at what the trade. I'm sure if you ask around, you'll find people who've got programs from those shows that are a collector's thing now, and you can see the list of traders. And a lot of those traders, not all of them, but most of those traders are still going. Do something to encourage them back. Don't just bring the big box companies that are producing, stuff
yeah.
that's way too expensive. You can wargame well on a budget. Learn your companies. Learn your
Mm,
companies. And Triples did that because you physically got to see all these companies. One of the few shows that did.
yeah. And it was an absolutely highlight of the wargaming year,
Yeah,
and it's sadly missed.
yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
thank you very much for that, mate. We shall have another break, and we'll be back with our world famous quiz. Okay, we are back with the features section of the Yorkshire Gamer Podcast, and the first bit is the quiz. And the little disclaimer at the start that we always have, that this isn't how good a war gamer you are, this is how Yorkshire gamer you are. So I think you've listened to this a few times, Mark,
I
so
have
you might
indeed.
have some answers already made. But this is usually one or the other, or a yes or no answer. And then sometimes we just have a chat and a laugh about some of the answers. So, question one: go big or go home?
Go big.
Go big. Excellent. Interested for this one. Contrast paints, great or a gimmick?
Absolute heresy. A gimmick.
Oh,
A gimmick.
gimmick.
A
That's
gimmick.
what we like.
And I can
We
prove it.
liked. Excellent. Well, we'll get to that, I'm
Yeah.
sure, when we talk about your
Feel free.
painting. Uh, um, Paintbrushes, Windsor and Newton, posh southern stuff, or Yorkshire made pro art?
Rosemary.
You're a Rosemary man.
Yorkshire made rosemary. I've been for many a year now.
Well, I'm actually going to pro art in a couple of weeks' time.
Oh, you little
So
tinker.
I am going to because I used to be in the area where I worked, and they're not far away from each other, so
Yeah.
there must be some link. So I should try and find out when I'm over there. But yes, they Rosemary and Co.
But they are
Maybe
they
Cow.
are Yorkshire, so that's all that matters.
Yeah,
That's
only
what. Yeah,
just
yeah.
Cowling's only about that far away from the
That's
Lancashire
that,
border,
that
but
that's like saying Manchester's only that far from Lancashire border. It's still over the border.
yeah, it is. It is an outpost.
Yeah.
An outpost of sanity. There's a little place called Bentham, which is further up the Dale, and that's gone from Yorkshire to Lancashire about 4 or 5 times
Yeah,
over history.
it's a bit like
Because
Skelmersdale.
nobody,
Yeah,
yeah,
Skelmersdale,
nobody
same, isn't it?
wants it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just bugger off. I don't want you. Anyway, 96 figures. Is that an army or a unit of pike?
It's a unit of pike. For
Excellent.
a moment there, I almost said army just to have people go, oh, after what
Woo!
he just said. No, it's a unit. It's a regiment.
Yeah,
It's a faction.
it is. Fuck off, faction. Right.
Yes.
6x4 table, big game or small?
That's what I put my lunch on when we run a game.
A side table.
It is. It's a side table. Yeah.
Yeah. Playing a game, are you going to go for points based or historical order of battle?
Historical order. It won't be points based. It would be
Hmm.
historical order of battle, but in terms, I would say more historical composition, shall we say? Because
Okay.
I'm not a great one for refighting battles, and that I'm just qualifying what I'm saying. But yeah,
Yeah.
historical over points.
No worries. Question 7. Do you use a wet palette or an old bit of MDF to mix your paints?
It'd be a piece of MDF, or in my case, a nice ceramic plate bought from a charity shop
Oh,
in North
what about
Yorkshire.
you?
Uh,
Hey,
yeah,
we like those ceramic plates. They're really
they're
good.
great.
Um, Undercoating. You were black
Black.
or white?
Straight away, black. Black.
Excellent. Drinking, is it Yorkshire tea or dirty mucky coffee?
Morning, it's coffee, and the afternoon, it's Yorkshire tea. And today, as you've seen, it's Taylor's of Harrogate, which is Yorkshire people.
It
Fruit
is.
teas. Fruit teas, because you
Nice.
don't want me on caffeine while I'm being interviewed.
Excellent. War games units, tightly packed or socially distanced?
Not socially distanced, but tightly packed, but allowing for the size of the figures. Because
Yes.
obviously older base sizes you can't get modern figures on. So I don't have them particularly spaced out, but I do allow for the size of modern figures. I think I've increased by about 20% on the old sizes, so they are still tightly packed.
Some of them Victrix horses are just so big you can't get them on the base.
Yeah, but they're plastic, aren't they? Those.
They are.
Yeah. Well, stop.
Shit.
Go back to metal. They'll always be smaller because it costs more money to make a metal horse.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I tried them for my Punic Romans and couldn't get them on the base, so I had to sling them and get some Aventine miniatures, which are absolutely
they are
gorgeous.
Yeah, lovely,
absolutely gorgeous. Question 11, doing very well so far. 2-hour club game or a weekend monster game?
Weekend monster game, always.
Interesting on this one. We're talking with our Nick Skinner question. This is avocado. Are they just posh, mushy peas?
I like avocado, but yes, they are just posh, mushy peas. You can do with avocado what you can do with mushy peas, and you don't burn your mouth. To me, it's mushy. It's cold, mushy peas. Have it with cold fish. Nice seafood dish. Mix some avocado up, but it is. Yeah, it's just mushy peas. Just posh, mushy peas. It is. Yeah.
It's a painted green.
Yeah.
Simple. The universal question: round dice. Allowed or banned on your table?
Shall I just rattle this box down here that I know's got one in it? Not allowed. I own them, but they are banned.
I got given one.
Yes.
Salute.
Yeah, I've got a few more you can have here if you really want them.
No,
including the original D100. Oh my God, was that a waste? Yep.
No.
Best use for that. Sling bullets. Use them as a sling bullet.
I've rolled this. I must have rolled it about 30 times for a laugh, and about twice it's actually come up on a number.
Yep. Absolutely useless.
Yeah, we need to find out who invented the round dice. Answer on a postcard or email to yorkshiregamer@gmail.com.
I could possibly answer that for you, but I won't. Let's keep it as a competition.
Yeah. You get to win half of my prison sentence for when I find them.
Why don't you just give them half the round dice? Just
that'd actually come up on a number, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
The same number every time.
Depending how you cut it, but yeah, at least get some kind of result. Yeah.
You could cut it so that only the 6 was left.
Yeah.
And every time you rolled it, it'd be a 6. Anyway, that'd be cheating.
Yeah.
Right, so down the chippy, are you going to have haddock or cod?
Haddock.
Ooh. Do you like a good table and a set of rules?
I do. So long as it's fun. Just a set of numbers. No. Give me something that describes how you mutilate your opposition. 95 different results for mutilating your opposition. I'm good with that. But just numbers, they don't really. I use them, but they don't turn me on.
I remember we used to have I can't remember what it was called. We had I can't remember. It was either a fantasy set of rules or a role-playing game.
Rollmaster.
That had a table like that in it.
Rollmaster.
Was that it?
Yeah.
Was that it?
Yeah. Disembowels, dies in 3 turns, and all that. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. Left eyeball pops, right eyeball goes in. -1 next to. Yeah. Rollmaster.
That's answered the question.
That's weird shit again for you.
It was. I did a bit of Middle Earth role playing was the one that we did.
Same parent system. Yeah. Both the same system. Yeah. Same company.
There we go.
There you go.
Question 16. 28mm is king. Yes or no?
Yes, unless it's not your thing.
Yeah.
So for me, 28mm is king. And I'm not taking anything away, but obviously, I would say if you can go 28 mil, go 28 mil. If you can't, do the best you can. Sorry, I've waffled on there, but yeah, for me, 28 mil is king.
Excellent. 17, unpainted miniatures allowed on the table, yes or no?
Get your coat, you're leaving. I think that's a
Foot.
no. That's a no,
Yes
definitely a
or
no.
no?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, definitely. Football question. Are you into football at all?
I'm not at all. But I will say, I
Excellent.
know the question, and the answer for me is Bradford City. For
Hey!
reasons you wouldn't believe.
Yeah,
Very quickly, I was up in Bradford to go and look at a cheeky little art gallery last summer, and we
yeah.
got lost. The sat nav, we couldn't get the sat nav to work, and I actually navigated by the Bradford City ground
Oh, yes.
because there's that.
Yeah,
I think there's a big Tesco to one side of it. There's a
yeah,
supermarket to one
yeah.
side. We got stuck in that car park for 20 minutes, and
Right,
we
yeah,
navigated out by finding Bradford City signage and going that
yeah.
way. Yeah. So there you are, Bradford City, but for no
Yeah,
sporting
because
reasons.
you go up the hill and turn right, and there's I can't remember the name of it now, but there's a little art gallery up there,
Yes.
isn't
Yeah.
there? The
Yeah.
Hockney. It's
Yeah.
got a load of Hockney stuff
Yeah.
in it.
That's the one. And I refuse to say Leeds United because my parents bought me a Leeds United kit when I was about 8 years old. With no interest in football, they bought me that instead of an Action Man, and I have never forgiven them for that.
Oh,
Never
that's
forgiven them.
cruel. That's cruel. That is
Harsh,
cruel.
harsh.
Cruel with unusual punishment, as they,
Yeah.
as they say in
So,
America.
so my wife describes me.
Question
Yes.
19. I think I know this one. Yorkshire or the other place over the hill?
Is there anywhere else?
Exactly.
Yorkshire, of course. Oh.
Of, of course. And finally, interested on your thoughts on this one. Games Workshop, are they the work of the devil?
Now I think they're the work of the devil.
Yeah,
I think modern day workshop, I would say work of the devil. I just don't like it. I can't. I don't like being pounced on when I walk into a shop. Blah blah blah. When we see each other in person. Ask me about my experience in Games Workshop when I got meted and greeted, as they say. It didn't happen a second time. Let's put it that way. I think when Games Workshop was truly a Games Workshop, and you could buy historical games,
yeah,
you could buy board games, you could buy you name it. Yes,
yeah.
it was a brilliant place, and it really was a Games Workshop. But yeah, you're on about my thoughts on that one. It's the great Satan now to me, but back in the day, back in the early pre probably 1988, it was a wonderful place, and I wouldn't have been where I am now without that, and without managers like Pete Berry. Every shop was different.
Yeah.
Every shop you went into was different.
It kind of reflected the personality of the person that was running it
Yes,
rather
yeah,
than having like a corporate sort of plan pressed upon you.
it would. If I can just quickly say, if anybody's at all interested in looking at workshop in the early days, there's a fantastic book that came out just this year called The Dice Men,
Mm,
by Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone, and it's got some
mm,
fantastic photos of all the branches. So the Sheffield branch, and
yeah,
I just sat there going back down. Oh, and I was actually more interested in the bakery next door. Do you remember that bakery, Hagenbach's Bakery? They were the
yeah,
Gregs. They were the Gregs of the day.
yeah,
They were the Gregs of the day, and we used to run in and out of Games Workshop for a sandwich, and then back into Games Workshop, and try not to get grease on Pete's stock. Uh, uh, how we didn't get terminated in that shop, I'll never know. But yeah, great Satan now, wonderful, wonderful angelic place back then.
back in the
Yeah,
day.
sorry.
Excellent. No worries. Well, you've done extremely well, mate. You're on 90%, which I think is extremely good. It's the upper quartile, as we say.
I can live with that. I'm Yorkshire.
Yeah,
I'm Yorkshire enough.
yeah, that's not bad at all. Not bad at all. So the next part of the features section
Yes.
is room 101. And we've had a couple of rants already from you, which is great to hear.
Are you ready?
I'm a So have you got one?
I have. I've got two, but you can have this one.
Go on.
Rules that cost more than the bloody figures that you're using. Right? Okay, you've done it. You've let me out the box. Right?
Always off.
You pay 120 quid for a set of rules. You buy
Yeah,
your faction. You buy your faction, let's say warband people, and then you have to buy a book for that and dice for that. and you spend 70 quid on your figures, 250 quid on your rules.
Yeah.
There's something wrong in the balance there. I'm sorry, but as you can see, I'm rolling my eyes here, Ken, and sitting back in my chair and
Yeah.
puffing
Yeah.
myself up, as you can probably see on the cam. I'm glad people can't see this because I'm red faced. Ooh, it gets my goat right up. No,
And
your rules should be affordable. It's about the figures. It's not about bloody big rule books.
I can guarantee from that rule book, there'll be about 4 pages that are actually rules.
Don't go down that road. You can't. Half of these rule
So,
books, 40 quid a time. You can't read them. They've got that much stuff printed behind your text.
yeah.
Ooh. Bad indexes.
Oh, if there's an index at all,
Oh, just
oh, we've had the no
if
indexing
if
rules before.
if you're going to do it, do two kinds of rules.
Yeah.
Do a big fancy book for your people that really can't get by without a picture every three lines,
Yeah.
and do a book of rules for people that want to get the toy soldiers out and play with the bloody toy soldiers.
Yeah.
Ooh. I've gone all northern. I've gone all professionally northern now. I'm fair riled. I am fair riled. Yeah,
Oh, that's an
yeah.
excellent
I'm
one.
looking
That
at
is,
you,
I have to
Warlord
say.
Games.
Yeah, I have to say. I can't remember which one it was. Probably Hail Caesar, maybe. And I'm kind of. I bought it, and it's this massive thick box. I'm
Yep.
thinking, oh, this is going to be brilliant. There's going to be loads of detail in here, and then there's like 4 pages of rules, and then there's a summary of the rules that's a little bit longer than 4 pages, and then there's thousands of pictures.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's all
I
right.
don't.
But
I don't mind a bit of eye candy, but if you're going to write a rule book, put rules in it.
yeah, yeah,
You know, or be honest and say that you're releasing a painting book with a mini rules set in it. Be honest about it. Stand up. If you can do it in four
exactly.
pages, make your book 4 pages.
Well, that's definitely
Well,
going in.
yeah.
No problems. No problems with that one. So we'll move on to the final section of the features section, and that's the Desert Island War Game. So Desert Island Discs is Radio 4, Radio 2 program now, where somebody gets stranded on a desert island and they can take certain items with them. So if you were to take a game with you, can be anything, size-wise, no restrictions, what would be the one game that you'd want to have with you?
Assuming you mean a miniatures game here,
Can be anything. Can be anything.
I
Somebody's
would.
choosing a board game in the past, so
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
whatever.
I don't. I think I would probably take a nice generic 28 mil
Mm.
Italian Wars game,
Oh,
right? Because it can be a multiplicity of different things. You can fight so many battles off that core collection.
mm,
Some nice simple terrain, good looking but
mm.
simple.
Yeah.
I've got to think about people that have got to get this stuff onto Desert Island for me. So, maybe a nice something reasonable, 15 by 5, 12 by 5, plenty of troops, plenty of colour, lots of flags. Italian Wars.
Oh,
I can't get bored with Italian Wars. I've done it to
no, you
death, and I
can't.
still can't tire of it.
Yeah, it is. It is my favourite period as well, as most people know.
Yeah.
Um, the second thing you can take is a book. What would you like to take along with you?
I would actually take. I've mentioned this one. I would take the Dice Men,
Oh, yes, the
um,
yeah, yeah.
because that book for me has got so much of my life in it, and so much about people that I know and knew. And it's an interesting read. I'm getting more and more into reading things about the hobby rather than and the hobby in all its forms. I'm just doing nothing but read books about it. But that's the book I'd take. It's plenty of eye candy, plenty of text, great anecdotes, great memories,
Mm.
and it's decent paper. So if I dropped it in my lagoon while I was
Be all
bathing
right.
on a Sunday morning, I'd stand a good chance in warm weather. Yeah,
Yeah, I have to say that I've not read it yet. I haven't got a copy, but everyone I've spoken to who has read it has said that it's a fantastic read because quite often you can get books that on a subject that you're really into, and because
yeah.
it's just so boring, you kind of put it down and get rid of it.
It's one you can dip into and then you'll miss something. You go back and read it again. It's worth every penny. It's a real work of love. It's fantastic.
Excellent. Looking forward to it. I will get a copy of it eventually. And finally, a war games unit. What's one that particularly means something to you, or one that
Ooh.
you've coveted over the years?
Now then, it would be. It's one I coveted when I was a kid, and again,
Right.
it's back to that Selyoken district
Yeah.
display game with the Irish regiments, the French
Oh,
Irish regiments in the green and yellow.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, what are you?
gloss finish, 36-man units, connoisseur figures, Tetrion basing, Gilder-esque, touched by the hand of St. Peter himself. Oh, yeah, all day. I'm not a Napoleonic fan, like I said, but that I saw that unit 2 or 3 times in the flesh, and every time I went all warm in the knees.
Yeah, the Irish Brigade unit
Yeah, ooh,
is an all time classic. It certainly is.
it is.
Right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we shall have another quick break, and we shall be back for our big topic very shortly. Okay, we are back now, and we're just going to talk about our big topic. And with Mark, there's quite a lot of subjects to cover, so we'll do what we can in the time that we have available. So the first thing we talked earlier on about your blog, and you obviously enjoy writing. Is that something that's come from school?
It was, yeah. I was no good at sports. I hated sports, and
Mm,
I negotiated out of sports on the understanding that I wasn't going to try hard in sports.
yeah,
So they were going to get wound up. They were going to end up having to put me in detention, and it was a conversation we had like this with the head of the games department, as they were back then. And I said, look, if I can get me my history teacher and my art teacher and my English teacher to let me go and sit in the classes they're running when I should be in games, will you just ignore the fact that I'm not there? And he went, yeah, but you've got to do it. So I had to go around and beg these 3 teachers. And so all the things, if you like, that are connected to me gaming, obviously, being able to read, being able to paint, and being able to actually, read something interesting, all came together. So I found myself sitting for 6 periods, a good 3 hours a week, either painting, doing my history homework, which
yeah,
which meant I wasn't doing my history homework at night, which meant I could paint
yeah,
figures for a living, which meant I could buy
yeah.
big armies and pretty much single-handedly keep up the English wargaming industry, I think. Um, and again with English, and so I could just get out of doing something I didn't want to do and do something that interested me. And it's just one of those things. I think if you're a gamer, if you can't read, you've got a problem.
Mm,
You know, at the same time, gaming, I know people that have learned to read from reading the old gaming books, the old like Warlock of Firetop
yeah,
Mountain. They're a
yeah.
great tool.
Mm,
So yeah, and the writing just kind of came off that because it started off me just I said to me I said to my wife 2000 it was Christmas 2011. I'd gone to see a friend of mine in town and have the Christmas mooch around the game stores in Sheffield. Something we've done from about 1983. We've done it every year, up until COVID. We carried it on. A mate of mine came back for 3 days from Japan, who I'd not seen for 25 years, and we were straight out Christmas Eve. We went on. It's called round here. It's called the Mooch. Are you going up
yeah.
Mooch? Are you going up Mooch, lad? I'm going up Mooch. And we just used to go around game shops as kids, and as adults, I think it just became something we did just for the sake of doing it. And a friend of mine, I was feeling really down, 2011, and he said, "Look," he said, "You've done all right." He said, "You've raised a family. You've got a house." He
Mm,
said, "You've had some good, you've had a good job. You've been in civil service. You've proved yourself."
mm,
He said, "Why don't you write your memoirs down?"
mm.
And I thought, really? He said, "Look," he said, "the stories that you tell in pubs, the stories that you tell at conventions, and you've heard some of it. You've stood and suffered me at conventions, Ken, a couple of times. Write them down." So I said to my wife, "Can I take a week off work to see how chapter one goes?" She says, "Yeah. We've
Mm.
got enough money coming in. Yeah, just you just do house cleaning while you're at it." So I sat down, you know, put my Hunter S. Thompson glasses on and my pen out my mouth, and I wrote a chapter and really enjoyed it. Read it back and thought, yeah, I think there's something here. I think there's something here. I'm no J.K. Rowling, thank God, but and it went. I said to her, "Can I have?" It came out. She gave me 3 months. She gave me 3 months paid leave, in essence, which was good because I'd just started up full-time painting. So really, I was taking a risk on tipping my business, into the briny, and it paid off. And it originally went to a company that specialises in war games publishing, and apparently one of the luminaries in our hobby of much repute and ancient wisdom said that if they published this book, he'd pull all his. Well, it's all right because I got a better deal. But it was very much. My blog is very much a child of the book, which has the same title, Real Life's a Bugger. A Tale of Sex, Dragons, and Rock and Roll, which was the 80s for me. It was either I was either listening to what certain people call cloth-eared progressive rock.
Yes.
I was trying to get off with girls and playing every game. A lot of role-playing games. And as I said, the book was kind of aimed at that market, even though there's wargaming stuff in it. That was the market you were aiming for, and that was the 80s for me. I think, I mean, 2 out of 3 is not bad. So, the Dragons and Rock and Roll went really well. I think we'll not talk about the other one, but it panned out well in the end. I buffed up all right as I got older.
Got there in the end. Got there in the end.
But yeah, it is it's something I do. I like, as you can probably tell, I like to communicate. I like to spin a yarn, and I think the writing for me now is a way to preserve my memories, but the memories of other people I've known and met and loved and hated. I respect every one of them, and it's time. We are unfortunately now to see getting all maudlin and morbid. A lot of us now are starting to wake up and find out we've got one friend less in the morning.
My apologies here. This is where the recording cut off, and we had to go back and go on to a different recording device, different recording setup, and we covered a couple of other subjects. So apologies, this section's missing, but back to the interview now. We were just talking about Satanic Panic, your miniatures range. So it's all a bit weird shit, I believe.
It's very weird shit, yeah. Basically, it's, as you can tell, it's kind of it's a homage to the Satanic Panic of the 1980s, when anybody who played a role-playing game was summoning Satan. If it was that easy, I'd have got more owns and more tails than I've already got. So basically, the idea was that I wanted to recreate the figures that were, that I loved as a kid, and friends loved, and this old hammer movement that's going now. Yeah, it's very much about the old aesthetic. So what I decided to do was get really nice sculpts done by decent sculptors. The best sculptor I've got, in my opinion, is Martin Buck, who's an ex-Foundry sculptor. And we're on the same vibe. I can just give Martin an idea and he'll run with it and come back with a set of sketches. And I think I've only once in about 8 or 9 ranges now actually had to say to him, no, I want it like this. So it's a really good, symbiotic relationship. But we put a twist on it, as whereas the old figures were, single piece castings, we went for multi-piece, multi-part castings, again, harping back to, the likes of QT models, and Lamin, another classic.
Bill Lamin.
Bill Lamin, yeah, rest in peace. So basically, that's what it is. Now, it is mostly fantasy, but we have got a range. I say we, it's me, it's just me. That's it.
Yeah, sure.
It's a hobby. I've got a beautiful range of Mongols, some beautiful characters, but all the horse archers are all split torso. so it stays with that multi-part, philosophy as far
Yeah.
as I can. Makes it very, very easy for people to have massive units with a lot of movement in them. And that's the whole ethos behind Satanic Panic, is creating nice figures, fairly priced. The rub to it is, even though I've kickstarted everything, I've got production molds, I've got master molds. I've not actually opened my web store yet, so
Right.
I've got this massive fan following, and
Yeah.
people think it's my day job, and I'm saying to them, look, no, actually, I'm a figure painter.
Yeah.
I'm a figure painter. I've got to do it in my spare time. So it got further complicated by the fact that I built a cracking little website, and then the company that owned the platform changed platforms, which wiped all the store out.
No.
And of course, as I've said,
Nightmare.
the multi-parts, there's about 14 different ranges, multi-part. So it's all now going to be, rephotographed, rebuilt,
Yeah.
and done, which I'm hoping to do this summer. But I'm getting a lot of love from people because I'm using the
Brilliant.
same ethos that I do with my painting. I'm
Yeah.
approachable. You can talk to me.
Yeah.
You can tell me if you want something, if it can be done, and I think it'll eventually, make a profit, or just make a penny. If it breaks even, it's good. It's just something I always wanted to do. It's kind of like a bucket list. I kind of went, write a book, have kids, own a
Yeah.
game shop. Yeah, done that. Make my game shop look like Games Workshop in that. Yeah, done that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Blown it. Yeah, done that. Miniatures company. Go on then. Let's see how hard it is. Can't be that. And actually,
Can't be that hard.
It's not that difficult when you've actually got people. You've got people that are interested. B, people that are behind you doing it, and C, people that understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
So as I say, I've got this. It really is a nice range, but I don't own one of my own figures, as I said earlier.
Yeah.
In fact, I've just today decided I'm going to use some of mine in the weird shit project, because why not?
Yeah.
Project weird shit. You've named it for me there, Ken. So yeah, I hold you responsible for Project Weird Shit,
Weird shit.
PWS. But yeah, so that's basically what it is. It may also be that I do. There's one or two English Civil War pieces that nobody makes. I'm not going to tell you what they are, but it's particular ways that troops fought or moved around the battlefield. Blow it if somebody does it, they do it. Musketeers up behind a cavalry figure for Royalist flying columns. Nobody makes one, so that's something that the multi-part thing works really well with, because we can go with two basic bodies on a horse, vary the horses, but put head variants on.
Yeah.
So you can finally make that flying column with musketeers behind a cavalry figure on one horse. Nobody's done it. They're a real thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It sounds.
So I'm
I think.
doing,
I think. I think the joy with miniatures ranges, how you're doing it is you can do what you are really into, rather than doing it just for the sake of it. It's like, I really want this. I think people will want it. I'm going to get that made.
Yeah, I mean, it's cost. I mean, if I'm honest with you, it's cost me thousands. I'm still. I mean, just this year alone, I sat and worked out one project, which is, here we're going to get weird again, is dwarves. And I want it to dwarves, dwarves.
Dwarves.
And what I want to do is not just have a range of dwarves, but have dwarves that, you've got different clans. So I've got 4 or 5 different, distinct looks that can be used together or exclusively. But we're looking at, I think we worked it out at 26 molds, to get a production mold and to get a master mold. And it's not, to get it done properly, it's not a cheap thing, so I'm not generating income from it. So if I treat it like a hobby, I don't break into tears when I'm looking at a four figure bill for molds. I just treat it as part of my hobby. And I think once I get fed up with throwing money in, then I'll try and make some money with it. And I've no doubt it's going to do it. But
because as you say that, it's not something I'm into, but I am aware of the old hammer scene and that style of figure and that style of gaming. It's kind of coming back into play now.
Yeah.
I guess, like most generations of hobbyists, not everyone goes through this, but they're into it heavily in the teens and the early 20s. then they meet someone, they get married, they have kids, and then the kids start going to school and they go, I've got a bit more spare time now. Remember that Warhammer I used to do?
Yeah.
And then they'll go into the Games Workshop store, like you were saying, and get mugged
Yep.
and go, fuck this, I don't want that.
That's
Uh,
exactly what it is. Yeah.
and come to, where can I get figures that are like what I used to have?
Well, I mean, as I said, the way I worked is when actually I ran a Kickstarter for one of the Rangers, and one of the backers came to me and said, "Could we have some more heads?" I said, "Well, yeah, but he said, "Well, no, 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 I don't mean. Will you add them in? If I
Yeah.
pay, if I pledge X amount, will you
Mm,
make me?" I said, "Yeah, you can. What do you want?" He said, "4 heads." So I got him a
yeah.
quick quote from Martin, and
Yeah.
I said, "Look, this is what it's going to cost you to get them made. I don't, I'll drop them into a mold. They'll fit into one of the molds."
Yeah.
And the guy went, "Brilliant! Can I have one like this, one like this, one like this?" He automatically, if you can imagine, if you've got 10 bodies and 10 heads,
Mm,
you've got 100 different figures. If you've got 5 different weapons that you can put in the hands, you've
yeah.
suddenly got 500 figures. And then if you've got 10 shields,
Mm,
you've got this exponential jump to 5,000 figures from 2 molds
yeah.
potential. And this is
Yeah.
what people like, because if they want to make them all the same, they can, stick them all into identical poses.
Mm,
But most people we're back to that thing we were talking about with the elite miniatures about
yeah.
how you twist them. Well, they can do that, but they can also twist the head, the weapon. They can change the shield, and all of a sudden they've got what's in essence, a unit of 40 of the same body with head variants and shields. Makes it very easy for them to paint a totally different set of
Yeah.
figures. They can get the rhythm going on the bodies, a bit slower on the heads, a bit slower on the
Mm,
weapons, but they get a 40 figure unit where every figure they're almost their figures. I make the lead, but how that figure looks when they've done it, that's their business. But we've done it
yeah.
even down to a range that's 15 millimeters high. Some lesser goblins, they're 15 mil
Yeah.
high, and they've
Yeah.
got separate heads, separate weapons, separate shields. I nearly broke Martin Buck, the sculptor. He did a fantastic job for me, brilliant job. But I nearly broke him, and then I definitely broke him when I said, "Can you do this with 75 millimeter high giants?" And the clever bastard did it. So he's kind of created figures very similar to the old Citadel multi-part giants in terms of build and the general style and the feel of them. But he's
Mm,
gone one further. He's actually done them with split torsos. So they've got all the
yeah.
loose parts the originals had, and then all these split torsos. You can make these fantastic variants, pieces
Yeah.
that I've not thought about it, and people are sending me pictures, and it's not about the money. If I break even getting a range imagined and created, that's brilliant. If I
Mm,
break even, fantastic. If I don't, I take a hit. But
mm,
actually seeing something that not just I've got a passion for, but the
mm,
sculptor's got a passion for, the mold
yeah.
maker's got a passion for, and the people that want the figures have got a passion for. It's
Mm,
rewarding, in this day and age. You can't really buy that feeling, that buzz you get. I mean, obviously you're
yeah.
paying money to get it, but you can't just like magic it. It's a
No,
collective effort all
yeah,
round.
I think
It's great.
one of the things that I've got from doing this podcast is how smaller manufacturers um, have that love for what they do.
Yeah,
And Ian McDonald from Flags of War, he puts his heart and soul into what he does, and the figures that he produces are stuff that he's interested in. And it's like you're saying there, I'm not that bothered if I make, I've got a day job that pays what I
yeah,
need, and then if I could break even, absolutely fantastic. And I think I it's like that X factor that you it's hard to quantify of where that extra love and joy comes from it. But I think you can see it in the figures for people who are really really doing it because they want to do it
yeah. I
rather than
mean,
make a big buck.
the great thing I've got with Martin, the sculptor, is he knows me so well now after about 4 or 5 years of us, going backwards and forwards.
Mm,
I mean, I'll be on holiday in Christmas, and I'm with one range. It was for some step nomad inspired
mm,
dwarves. And I was sat during lockdown outside at a garden centre after Christmas thinking, I'm out in fresh air, it's brilliant. Big sausage sandwich in my hand, cup of tea, my missus.
And there's a guy sat kind of facing me, got his back to me, but I'm looking at him,
Mm.
a front back, and he's got Viking haircut, little Viking. He's only about 5'6".
Yeah.
And I'm thinking that's an idea for some weird shit. I contact Martin. Martin's still in a Christmas dinner coma, and he's got me texting him saying, Martin, I've got this idea. Straight away came back that enthusiasm. You've got something, Mark. Go for it. Do it.
Yeah.
And it's working with people like that I find it's really, really, it's just amazing because you're sharing your love in different degrees. And the fact that he knows how I work and what I want, and I know what he can do. And sometimes he doesn't know that he can do what I'm asking, but he does it.
Yeah.
He does.
I bet he enjoys that challenge as well. I bet he enjoys being pushed.
I think he enjoys the challenge. I just don't think he enjoys the initial message from me saying, I've got this idea. Generally it's I've got this idea. And then it goes downhill, but then he'll send me a sketch and he'll sneak something in that I've not thought about. And I'll think, that looks like this figure from whenever. And I'll say to him, Martin, I've got this. And he'll just come back, we'll kind of cross swords, and he'll say, you fell into my trap. Because I've not thought of something that he wants to do. I'm quite happy to do it if it works. And it's a brilliant way to work because it's not short of me, bankrupting myself. I do tend to run things by people and say, would you be interested in? And if I think there's enough momentum on the Satanic Panic Facebook page, I'll do it. And people might say, well, we'd like this. But in return, Mark, if we back you on this, we'd like to see, fine, I can do it. We can do it. And it's really, really, it's wonderful actually in a day where we've got this time we're living now where everything's big box and you get what you're given. To actually hand some of that power back to your client base, and make them really engage, make them feel that they're part of the process is something I never thought I'd do. I don't play well with others. So the fact that I'm now able to, do that is a bonus for me. It's like, actually, I'm not the only, lover of weird shit.
Yeah.
With the same quirks, it's great. I can't, I just can't find words for it a lot of time. It's just gives me a buzz.
I just love the fact now that there's some 5'6" Viking looking guy
from the Barnsley area.
He's got no idea that he's inspired a range of figures.
And he has. He has. He's there. If I ever meet him, I shall buy him a bacon bap. He'll get a sausage butty. I'll have to explain to him. Probably get a broken nose doing it. But excuse me, mate. 5 years ago, you inspired me to make a little toy soldier based on you. Smack,
Fantastic. I bet I'll be over the moon. Should be absolutely fantastic. So just before we go, mate, just before we finish off, we've got to mention your TV stardom. We mentioned it at the start.
Stardom. Yeah.
Was it Model Town? I think it was called.
It was Model Town. I think it was episode 13, and literally half the show it was Discovery Shed that ran it, and Spartan Games had got the teeth into that. They said, can you come down and give a painting thing? I said, I can come down. So we went down, myself and Kate, X o'clock in the morning on a train. Neither of us drove back then. Down to Reading, connected from Reading out to the middle of nowhere, and we filmed, loads of terrain painted by Kate, big Norman keeps.
Yeah.
I'm doing this is how you paint a figure bit. Let's keep it simple for stupid, and this guy's trying to keep up, and it's all very, very simple stuff. Great day out, apart from nobody put any catering on.
Oh.
At which point, to her credit, my missus lost her rag, absolutely lost her rag, and said, right, go out, take some money to Neil, the guy that ran Spartan. Fetch me this, and this. She then proceeded to put on a buffet.
Oh, nice.
Because when she went to school, she actually had a part-time job catering before she found Real World. And she does it. She does a damn good northern buffet, It's
perfect.
Everything you want bar the tripe. We'll save that for other place of it, Hill. And she catered for them. And then come end of day, we had all on to try and get Costa's train tickets back. So talk about. And the cheeky buggers never sent me a copy. I had to wait until somebody said, "No, this." So honestly,
I thought there would have been a DVD sent to you, and
the only way you can get it now, it's on YouTube. But it was really good because to say it was actually a model railway program where half the program focused on building this layout and how you went, and then they looked at other things. So there'd be basic modelling, military modelling, wargaming as an offshoot. Brilliant idea, long overdue. There's too many divisions between model railways and war games and military modelling, and those need closing up. But really, really good day. Me making a bigger fool of myself than I've made today. Still got long hair and blonde tints in at that stage.
Oh, nice.
I just got back off holiday when they said, "Can you come down and do this?" So I was still surf fresh from Newquay.
Brilliant.
Still reasonably toned.
It's nice to see a bit of wargaming and a bit of modelling on telly from every now and again, and I think we get a bit of a duff deal on it, really. But I suppose YouTube has now taken over, and you choose what you want to watch.
We get a duff deal because the first people they go to are Games Workshop, and they are not the gatekeepers of the hobby. I'm risking a rant here and a backlash, but they're not. They are two different disciplines, and I think what they need to do is certainly a couple of triples before triples closed down, before it closed its doors. We had the Times came up. The Times wanted to talk to women in wargaming, so they sent a female reporter up. So they got a female reporting perspective. Brilliant, fantastic, talking to women who were actually, not just the old cliche of eye candy. There were women who were actually actively gaming or were in the industry, and it did change things, and it opened it up. It showed it as a more family friendly, less of the misogyny that we used to have.
Yeah,
we're all guilty of a smart arse quip now and again, and anybody who says they're not from the old days, you're a liar, and I'm calling you out. You're up there with the people that walk around in pilot jackets at conventions like they're on Storage Wars. They bust around from stand to stand, shouting what they want and pushing women and kids out at way. Well, that's another one of my rants, which we won't have today. You can follow that on my blog, people. But you know who you are, and I will get you. But it really opened it up, and we need more like that. But we need people to see that, yes, there are lots of women in fantasy gaming, because it's just an easier, it's an easier, if you like, entrance point. Because a lot of them have read vampire books or fantasy books at school, or whatever. But I think women in the historical wargaming side of things is long overdue, much more needed. And I'll tell you what, there's a lot of men could learn from playing against the missus. Show the missus how to play. They'll have you round a corner. My missus did the first time she played me. WRG Ancients. Sixth edition. She gave me the pasting of a lifetime. I've never forgotten that. And she was pregnant as well, so she was dealing with all that. And that's how we got through her pregnancy. She wargamed at 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning when she couldn't sleep.
Yeah. We
went downstairs. She could sit comfortably on the floor, and we'd dig out big Macedonian and Celt armies that we both got back, 35 years ago. And she got through a pregnancy, and that's what really got her into wargaming. And she ran the shop. People know her on the wargaming scene.
So as we wind to the end, then, mate,
yes,
you get a chance to ask me a question if you want. You don't have to, but you can ask me a question at the end.
Right, go on then. If there's one thing from the past, seeing as we've focused a lot on the past, if there's one thing from the past, hobby wise for you, that you could kind of like reinvigorate and bring back now that you think would improve the hobby. This is a difficult one. What do you think? What from the past could you bring to the present to make the hobby better than it seems to be now?
That's a tough one.
Thank you.
Oh, I need a bit of thinking about thinking. I get my thinking cap on.
Do you want to come back in episode 46 with that one?
Yeah, come back. Fucking Mark stumped me. No, right.
Go on.
I'll tell you what I'm going to say. This might be controversial, but it might get me to trouble. You
I
know
hope
what?
so.
I don't care. Um, I would like to bring back, and I've had a little bit of this recently with the with my Garibaldi stuff. I'd like to bring back the joy of discovering new ranges and new periods and
Yes.
searching for things and working to get an end product. I don't. One of the great things about the hobby today is that you can get virtually anything that you want
Yeah.
like that, and it's there, and that is great in some ways. But then other ways, I quite enjoy the chase, and I quite enjoy the looking for things, and that feeling that you would get going into a shop and finding something that you couldn't buy, or you've
Yeah.
looked for years to
Absolutely.
find, and it's
Yeah.
there, and you think, bastard, I'm buying it. Whereas
Yeah.
now you just type it in eBay or Google or wherever, and bang, it's there, and you're buying
Yeah.
it, and it's instant
Yeah.
gratification. And there's something that we've kind of lost. Well, I feel I've lost in that search and chase, looking for things to do with a period or whatever. So
Yeah.
these Garibaldi and stuff that I've done, and my papal forces and the French, I've got figures from American Civil War ranges, from Triple Alliance ranges, stuff that I've converted myself, and I've had to work to get it all together as a
Yeah.
project.
Yeah.
And I got to be honest, I've enjoyed that, and that's what
Yeah.
I'd like to bring back. And I have in a little bit of a
Excellent.
way with that. It's
Yeah.
all
Good
right.
choice.
That
Yeah.
was
I
not a
mean,
bad answer.
yeah.
That.
I mean, a quick one from me. The first time I found a set of Vietnam rules was in
Mm,
Games Workshop in about 1983, and it
mm.
was the body count rules
Body
by
count.
by
Yeah.
Endura. There were no Vietnam rules. It was
Mm,
still a taboo. It was still a very difficult thing to war game. And now they 10 a penny. And like you
yeah.
say, I found this set of rules. Then I found figures. I went up to Liverpool with my dad when he'd
Mm,
gone out to, he was a stock taker for a furniture company, auditor.
mm.
And he'd gone to do an audit on a branch. Oh, there's games in Liverpool, massive games.
Oh yes,
Oh, I could
yes. I
talk for an
love
hour
that.
on that.
I
Yeah,
love that
yeah.
store.
Went in
Loved it.
there, platoon 20, bought every figure I needed. Then I'd got to
Mm,
get the books.
yeah.
So Osprey, there was no internet. You got to physically find out. Then you spoke to people. Then you got to, you actually sometimes met somebody who'd been there,
Yeah.
as and you built a picture up, and you had to really work for it. So yeah, I think what you've said there makes a lot of sense to me, because there's not the search, and half of the fun for me as a kid was the research and getting a
Yeah.
drop on somebody else. And look, I've got this, and
Yeah.
you've got a big drop on people with this Garibaldi. You've had
Yeah.
me so close. You had me so close to a 4-figure purchase. I'm not
Yeah.
kidding. And I'm
Yeah.
not going to give in to you. Not this year, anyway. It's weird shit or bust. But that's a brilliant answer. Thank you. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. Well, that just leaves us to say for me to thank you very much, Mark, for all your time today. We've had a little bit of technical trouble here and there, but you've stuck with it. So thank you very much for this. And time to say good night to everyone. So,
Yep. Well, good
right.
night to everybody. And if you know me, I'm very sorry. And if you don't know me, I'm very sorry. And Ken, just thanks for being a great host.
No worries. Anytime, mate. Good night,
Right, thank
everyone.
you.
So there we go. Another podcast is over, and I hope you enjoyed that chat with Mark. I certainly did. Massive apologies with the technical failure and the loss of a big section of the interview. But as I said at the start, I shall invite Mark back on, and hopefully we will be able to get down a recording about his painting business, Conflict in Colour. So we will be recording Bruising the Vineyard next Wednesday. And as I said at the start, got any questions, drop them through to yorkshiregamer@gmail.com. And if you are relatively new to this podcast, might even be your first one, then Yorkshire Gamer is around on various social media. I am on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. So just search for Yarkshire Gamer. That's with an A. So Yankee Alpha Romeo Kilo Sierra Hotel India Romeo Echo Gamer in any search engine, and you will find all the stuff that I do. And if you get a chance, give us a like, give us a follow, give us a review on Apple Podcasts. All that helps to increase the, I can't remember what it's called, the profile of the podcast, and bumps us up those lists so that people get an opportunity to see what's here and then maybe give it a listen. And I know there's quite a few of you out there, and the audience for these episodes keeps growing and growing and growing, and some are topping 3,000 listens on the various formats, which is absolutely amazing. And if you've got anybody into gaming and you think might be interested in giving it a listen, then give them an introduction as well. So until next time, see you.